Chapter 65. If the other party was really a descendant of Duke Zhou, even though Zhao Fengchen was an imperial army commander and had the backing of the Zhao clan, he wouldn't dare to act recklessly. What was more troublesome was that these scions of nobility didn't lack money at all. Furthermore, they were extremely willful and couldn't be judged by common sense. It was possible for the scions of nobility to reject a bid of 40,000 gold taels, just like what happened in the day. Zhao Fengchen wasn't confident that the other party would sell the sword to him. The bearded subordinate had followed Zhao Fengchen for many years, so how could he not know what Zhao Fengchen was thinking? In fact, the news that he had found was even more serious than what Zhao Fengchen knew. That person was a famous profligate scion in the capital. Not only was he willful, he was also rebellious and liked to go against his family. There was a high chance that such a person would reject Lord Zhao's request. Lord, this isn't good. Even though Duke Zhou is famous, we can't act recklessly. However, this matter isn't completely hopeless. The bearded subordinate from the imperial army suddenly said. Oh! A gleam flashed across Zhao Fengchen's eyes. What do you mean? I had my brothers investigate the matter, and by chance I found out that that lad has an uncle who is serving in our imperial army. He's a minor guard at the northern gate. Even though we can't act recklessly on the matter regarding the sword, if Lord were to meet that uncle of the Wang clan, it might be better than going to the Wang clan personally. The bearded subordinate of the imperial army offered his advice. This time Zhao Fengchen was truly surprised. There were 4 gates in the royal palace. The north, south, east, west, and west was where the Son of Heaven resided. Since the Son of Heaven resided in the north, who would dare to reside above him? Thus, even though it was known as the Northern Gate, it was usually closed. The minor guard there was actually the lowest position in the imperial army, as well as the most insignificant one. Zhao Fengchen didn't expect that the son-in-law of Duke Zhou would be serving in such a place. Probably has something to do with the Yao clan. Zhao Fengchen thought. The imperial army was the personal guard of the Son of Heaven. Even though the Yao clan was of high status, there was a limit to how far they could reach in the imperial army. Zhao Fengchen guessed that given the Wang clan's old master's style, there was a high chance that the capability of that uncle of his was limited. However, this had nothing to do with him. As these thoughts flashed across Zhao Fengchen's mind, an idea formed in his mind. Pushing away the teacup before him, Zhao Fengchen stood up and walked out. Walala! While Zhao Fengchen was leaving the room, countless pigeons were flapping their wings in the dark night, flying out of the capital in every direction. Investigate! 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 It's impossible for such a big thing to go unnoticed. In the capital, there's nothing that can be hidden from the swordsmithing clans. If the sword didn't belong to them, then it could only belong to someone else. Deep in the mountains, wild in the mountains, small villages, small towns, all of you. This is my best chance to surpass the great swordsmithing clans. As long as we can find the origin of those treasured swords, we can become the #1 swordsmithing clan in the world. Countless messages were sent in all directions by carrier pigeons. No one believed that the sword and saber in Wang Chong's hand appeared out of thin air. The greatest surprise of participating in the sword duel gamble at the Blue Bottle Pavilion was that even the great swordsmithing clans didn't know of the origin of the sword. The swordsmithing industry was inextricably linked, and the forging of a sword involved many aspects. There were ores, swordsmithing masters, furnaces, coal. No one believed that they wouldn't be able to find the slightest trace of the origin of the sword. As long as they could find the origin of the sword in Wang Chong's hand wouldn't be important anymore. To many of the local powers that had been suppressed by the great swordsmithing clans in the capital, this was the best chance to surpass them. Pung pung pung. Early in the morning, before the sun had even risen, the sound of punches could be heard from the backyard of the Wang family residence. Dressed in a gray cultivation technique robe with a belt tied around his waist, Wang Chong was practicing his punches in the courtyard. With the crisis in the clan resolved and the matter regarding the Hyderabad ores settled, Wang Chong's heart, which had been hanging in the air, slowly settled down. Now, he could finally focus on martial arts. Pung pung pung. Wang Chong executed the celestial steps and his fists would either tremble or explode, exerting a tremendous force. The air around him surged, producing a sound reminiscent of a tidal wave. 3 chi away, Potted plants as thick as a child's arm trembled from the impact of his punches. The cultivation of Herculean punch required one to focus all of one's strength. Only when the air around one's body and footsteps were moving like tidal waves could one be considered to have grasped the essence of the technique. Wang Chong spent a long time before he finally managed to stretch his meridians and muscles to adapt to the might of the Herculean punch. It's about time, Wang Chong thought. The reason why Wang Chong chose to cultivate the Herculean punch while cultivating the dragon bone art wasn't just because of the might of this fist technique, allowing him to exert strength several times that of his own. More importantly, once he cultivated it to the point where the air around his body was surging, producing a sound reminiscent of a tidal wave, he would be able to utilize the intent of the Herculean punch to stimulate his blood and qi, speeding up the cultivation of the dragon bone art. These two factors complemented each other. Wang Chong had unintentionally discovered this trick. Closing his eyes, Wang Chong's blood began to surge. Like tidal waves, it flowed through his meridians and blood vessels. Along with the flow of his blood, Wang Chong could feel a weak and refreshing origin energy seeping into his body. Passing through his blood and meridians, the origin energy finally seeped into Wang Chong's bones and marrow. Under the effects of this energy, Wang Chong could clearly feel that the rate at which he cultivated the dragon bone art had increased significantly. Pung! A thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind and he abruptly punched out. Without using any special moves, Wang Chong simply executed the ordinary Herculean punch. Paired with the dragon bone art, he began to cultivate in the backyard of the Wang family residence. Time slowly passed and with no one to disturb him, Wang Chong quickly entered a trance-like state. After an unknown period of time, Wang Chong exhaled deeply. Beads of sweat rolled down his body and even his clothes were drenched. In this cultivation, Wang Chong could feel that his strength had grown significantly. My conjecture is correct. Using the Herculean punch together with the dragon bone art can indeed speed up the cultivation of the dragon bone art. Wang Chong thought. This cultivation was clearly much faster than usual. It was equivalent to 2 days' worth of cultivation. This was the effect of the Herculean punch. However, the cultivation of the Herculean punch was extremely taxing on one's stamina. From last night till now, Wang Chong felt that it was about time. I should return to my room to wash my face first. Mother and little sister should be awake by now. Exhaling deeply, Wang Chong retracted his cultivation. Picking up a towel hanging on a nearby tree branch, he wiped the sweat off his face and walked back to his room. When he passed by a fake mountain, Wang Chong suddenly thought of something and threw a punch. Boom! Wang Chong's heavy punch struck the fake mountain. And with a loud boom, the fake mountain shattered into countless pieces. Not bad. To be able to shatter a mountain with a single punch, the might of this punch is already sufficient to deal with an origin energy tier 6 or tier 7 expert. Wang Chong smiled and nodded his head in satisfaction. This was the effect. Given his current cultivation realm, it was impossible for him to split open a fake mountain like this. However, through the might of the Herculean punch, he was able to create a might comparable to an origin energy tier 6 or tier 7 expert. The time I have spent cultivating is still too short. I should be able to reach even higher realms in the future. Wang Chong chuckled in his heart. Everything about the Herculean punch was good, but when it wasn't strong enough it would still hurt badly. Wang Chong flung his sore palms and quickly returned to his room. The matter at the Bluebottle Pavilion hadn't erupted yet. At the very least it was still calm on the surface. Thus, despite the huge commotion yesterday, the Wang family residence was still peaceful. Wang Chong hurriedly washed up, ate his breakfast, and left the residence alone. Next it's time to carry out that matter. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind as he stood on the streets. In his previous life, the Tang dynasty had countless brilliant marshals and great generals. However, these people were like shooting stars, falling one after another in that huge upheaval, disappearing into the darkness of history. And of all these generals, there was one that left Wang Chong the most regretful. His name was So Yung-sun. In this world, there were many things that were different from Wang Chong's memories, and So Yung-sun was one of them. He was an elder of 3 dynasties, an important official, and one of the legendary marshals under Wang Chong of the Tang dynasty. 50 years ago, this name was like the sun in the sky, and he wielded unparalleled influence in the military. But now, his name had almost been forgotten by the people. In the Tang dynasty, many people thought that he had died a long time ago. This was because he was much older than Wang Chong's grandfather. By the time Wang Chong's grandfather and the old master of the Yao clan ascended to power, he had already retired. And now, even Wang Chong's grandfather was addressed as Duke Jiu. From this, one could imagine how old that person was. The reason why Wang Chong remembered him was because several years later, when the upheaval arrived and thousands of foreign cavalry swarmed into the capital, he was the one who single-handedly stopped the foreign cavalry, buying time for the civilians in the capital to evacuate. However, it was a pity that he had overexerted his potential and died in the capital. Buried together with him was the unparalleled martial art that was reputed to be the most lethal in the Tang dynasty. Wang Chong could still remember what one of those dying seniors had said to him when he was in danger, and accepted the imparting of energy to him of the few surviving seniors. Although you have obtained our lifetime's martial arts, it's a pity that So Yung-sun's unique skill has become extinct. If the old man wasn't so stubborn, perhaps everything would be different. But now, you can only rely on yourself. Chapter 66. Wang Chong had memorized many martial arts techniques, but none of them could compare to the art of God and demon obliteration created by So Yung-sun old Marshal Su. In this reincarnation, Wang Chong's greatest wish on the path of martial arts was to obtain the art of God and demon obliteration, the #1 technique in terms of lethality, and accomplish what he was unable to accomplish in his previous life. However, it was easier said than done. To obtain the recognition of old Marshal Su, he had to go through many trials, and it was not an easy task. Character, talent, and strength were all indispensable. Even if he had all of them, he might not be able to succeed. Even during the previous dynasty, when the late emperor asked for a prince to be under the name of So Yung-sun, to be his disciple and inherit his secret art, he was rejected. The difficulty was unimaginable. Moreover, the gates of the Su residence were closed all year round, and one could not even enter, so it was even more impossible. However, Wang Chong knew of a chance, and it might be the only chance to get in touch with this unparalleled old marshal of the Tang dynasty. In his previous life, when he was homeless, Wang Chong met an old servant of the Su family by chance and heard about it. It turned out that it was different from what many people imagined. So Yung-sun did not accept disciples. On the contrary, in the last 10 years of his life, he had been trying to find a qualified successor, and he even did it himself. If not for that old servant, many people would not have known that in the west of the capital, under the 1,000-year-old locust tree, there was a stern white-haired old man who appeared punctually with a chessboard every day. He was the famous war god So Yung-sun. So Yung-sun had appeared there for 10 years, but no one had noticed him. Even those who had played chess with him did not know his true identity until they died. If Wang Chong wanted to get in touch with So Yung-sun, this was his only chance. To the Ghost Tree district in the west of the city. On the street, Wang Chong hailed a carriage and went straight to the west of the city. The Ghost Tree district in the west of the city was densely packed with people. Many old people and children were playing here. According to the words of the other world, this was actually a public square. Wang Chong got off the carriage and went straight to the old locust tree. I wonder which one is So Yung. Wang Chong thought to himself. There were many people playing chess in the square. It was not easy to find So Yung-sun. Most importantly, Wang Chong had never seen him before. Even during that great turmoil, when the foreign cavalry invaded the capital, Wang Chong was very far away and couldn't see it clearly. Fortunately, I asked a few more questions back then. Wang Chong secretly rejoiced. Back then, out of respect for the old marshal and out of benefits, Wang Chong had asked a few more questions. Thus, he knew that So Yung-sun's chessboard was different from others. His chessboard was gold-plated, which was the best way to identify him. However, when Wang Chong walked around the Ghost Tree district, he couldn't help but be stunned. He's actually not here. On the east side of the 1,000-year-old locust tree, Wang Chong immediately saw a stone table with a golden chessboard on it. Although the chessboard was there, the person was not. Only a 4 to 5-year-old child was there, yawning in boredom. Little guy, where's the old man playing chess here? I don't know. He only said that someone was coming and told me to give him this chess piece. He will only appear after I pass it. The child was chubby and looked very cute. Hearing someone's question, he opened his eyes. As he spoke, his chubby little hand handed over a black chess piece. The chess piece was covered in sweat. Wang Chong looked at the black chess piece that was covered in sweat and was stunned for a moment before understanding. This was a small test, and the content of the test was to play chess. There was only one chess piece, so one could only place it once. If the fruit was placed correctly, Old Marshal Su would naturally appear. If it was placed wrongly, it would be equivalent to being eliminated, and Old Marshal Su would naturally not appear. Wang Chong understood the other party's meaning, and his mind instantly became clear. Little guy, this silver ingot is for you. Wang Chong stuffed the silver ingot over and took the black chess piece from the child's hand. Then he quickly began to observe. The chessboard was crisscrossed, but there weren't many chess pieces. The black and white chess pieces were all gathered in one corner. It looked as if two armies were fighting for a high ground. This is a localized chess game. Wang Chong took a look and couldn't help but laugh. This was a standard, iron chess game. Obviously, Old Marshal Su wanted to test the other party's ability to lead troops in battle. What the Tang dynasty needed was not one or two martial artists, but a general who could lead troops in battle. So Yung Sun, as a legendary general of the Tang dynasty, obviously hoped that his successor would have a certain level of military ability. Perhaps it was because he was approaching the end of his lifespan, or perhaps he was worried that there would be no one to inherit his unique skill, so Yung Sun didn't have too many difficulties in this aspect. In this iron chess game, as long as the black side placed a chess piece in the center northwest corner of the white chess pieces, they could change their situation, delay a little, and successfully pass the first test. However, all of this was different for Wang Chong. In his previous life as the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains, Wang Chong wasn't chosen by the elders because of his martial arts. On the contrary, in his previous life, Wang Chong started too late and missed the optimal foundation establishment period. Even if he tried his best to catch up, he still wasn't outstanding. The reason why Wang Chong was chosen by the remaining elders in the midst of danger and became the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains was due to his commanding ability. Thereafter, the army led by Wang Chong proved his worth with his performance. In the few years that Wang Chong led the army, the number of foreign cavalrymen he killed was even more than the number of foreign cavalrymen he killed in the past few decades. He was hailed as the most formidable war god in the history of the Central Plains. So Yung Sun was truly looking for the wrong person to test him with such a chess game. Waiting for death wasn't his style. Defending passively wasn't his style either. Wang Chong placed the black stone on the board. Instead of placing it at the northwest corner of the white stones, he placed it firmly at an unexpected location. After leaving the Ghost Tree district, Wang Chong strolled around the city before returning home to continue his martial arts training. It would be grandfather's birthday in a few days. Since the Wang clan was a clan of generals and ministers, martial arts was also part of the examination. Wang Chong didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. Unknowingly, it was already evening. Wang Chong was cultivating the dragon bone art in the backyard when he suddenly heard a commotion. "Brother-in-law, why are you here?" A surprised voice sounded in the front courtyard. It was his mother's voice. "Shuhua, is Chong'er back? I'm looking for Chong'er." "Chong'er? He's cultivating inside." It was his mother's voice. She didn't seem to mind it at all. "It's uncle." Wang Chong retracted his cultivation and was surprised. He recognized that the agitated voice belonged to his uncle, Li Lin. However, it was rare for uncle to come to his house. Even if he did, he would usually be with big aunt Wang Rushuang. However, Wang Chong could only hear his uncle's voice and not his big aunt's. This was the first time such a situation had occurred. "Let's take a look." Wang Chong retracted his cultivation and walked in the direction of the voice. Wang Chong met big uncle Li Lin in the main hall. "Chong'er, do you have the number 1 sword in the world?" Upon seeing Wang Chong, big uncle Li Lin went straight to the point and his voice rose a few octaves. His face was flushed and he seemed extremely agitated. Big uncle Li Lin had a wooden personality and rarely spoke. This was the first time Wang Chong saw him so excited. "Uncle, did someone look for you?" Initially, Wang Chong was perplexed as to why big uncle Li Lin would look for him. However, upon hearing those words, He immediately guessed something. Chong'er, how did you know? Li Lin was astonished. However, recalling Wang Chong's previous actions, he immediately understood. Chong'er, you must have never imagined that it was General Zhao Fengchen. Commander's son was also there. Li Lin didn't hide anything and told him the whole story. As it turned out, when Li Lin was still in his room, Zhao Fengchen knocked on his door and walked in. Accompanying him was the commander of the Imperial Army, Chen Huai. It was one thing for Zhao Fengchen, but Chen Huai was his direct superior. Li Lin had served in the Imperial Army for a long time, but this was the first time an Imperial Army superior had taken the initiative to look for him. Chen Huai first looked for Li Lin and spoke a bunch of praises for Li Lin's previous performance. He said that he was preparing to transfer him to the West Gate. Then, he suddenly changed the topic and said that he was willing to pay 42,000 gold taels to buy a sword for him. And the one who sold the sword to him was someone he had never expected, Wang Chong. At that moment, Li Lin felt as though he was going insane. What kind of sword could be worth 42,000 gold taels? What was even more ridiculous was that the person who sold the sword was his nephew, Wang Chong. Li Lin was stunned. He couldn't wrap his head around the situation at all. His first reaction was, is this a joke? Wang Chong is only a 15-year-old child. How can he have a sword worth 40,000 gold taels? Chong'er, tell me what is going on. Is what they said true? Li Lin grabbed Wang Chong's arm and asked anxiously. Yes. At this moment, Wang Chong relaxed and nodded his head. SSS. Li Lin released his arm and returned to his seat. Looking at Wang Chong, he took in a deep breath. It was too shocking. Li Lin widened his eyes in shock as he stared at Wang Chong. It was as though he was meeting him for the first time. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. He was also contemplating the same question. It was within Wang Chong's expectations that Zhao Fengchen would look for big uncle Li Lin and have him plead on his behalf. Wang Chong had expected Zhao Fengchen to look for him personally. However, this was for the best. The fact that Zhao Fengchen had taken the initiative to look for big uncle Li Lin had cleared up some of the thoughts in Wang Chong's mind. Uncle, do you want to be the Grand Marshal? Wang Chong suddenly asked. What? Li Lin was shocked by Wang Chong's words. He hurriedly waved his hands and said, Don't spout nonsense. Do you think that the Grand Marshal is someone to joke about? Wang Chong smiled and didn't pursue the matter. What about the Grand Marshal? I don't have that capability, Uncle Li Lin said. Hearing those words, Wang Chong chuckled. Without a doubt, Big Uncle was ambitious. Wang Chong could sense it from his eyes. Chapter 67. No one was willing to be left out. There was no one who didn't want a high position. Big Uncle was the same as well, even though he was just a minor guard of the gates. Of everyone in the Wang clan, Big Uncle Li Lin was the least valued. In terms of commanding troops and commanding subordinates, he couldn't match up to his father. In terms of fighting prowess, he couldn't match up to Little Uncle. And in terms of political maneuvers, he couldn't match up to Big Uncle. Therefore, when he became the young guard of the palace gate, his grandfather never helped him again. Grandfather thought that Uncle wasn't capable enough to be of great use. As a minor guard of the North Gate, even though his position wasn't high, it was far from the whirlpool. His safety was sufficient to protect his big aunt and uncle for the rest of their lives. However, Wang Chong's view was different from his grandfather's. Toward big aunt and uncle, Wang Chong was filled with gratitude. In his previous life, when the Wang clan was in trouble, big aunt and uncle were the ones who helped the Wang clan out. On top of that, uncle might not be outstanding, but his character wasn't bad. He was a qualified soldier. Back then, in that calamity, quite a number of Imperial Army members fled. However, Uncle Li Lin, a minor guard of the North Gate, fearlessly gathered the Imperial Army to form a defensive line. In the end, he died on the battlefield. Wang Chong would always remember his back view when he left. Broad, sturdy, and imposing. A person's capabilities could be nurtured later on. Grandfather only saw one side of him, but he didn't know that there was another side hidden within him. If he was given a chance and groomed, Uncle would be able to become an independent figure. And Zhao Fengchen was the best opportunity that came knocking on his door. What better opportunity could there be than to follow this future Grand Marshal of the Imperial Army? Uncle, do you believe in me? Wang Chong looked at Uncle Li Lin and suddenly asked. Li Lin was taken aback. If it was in the past, when Wang Chong was only 15, he would only laugh at Wang Chong's words. However, after the previous incident, Li Lin didn't dare to underestimate this nephew of his anymore. In truth, no one in the Wang clan dared to underestimate Wang Chong anymore. If it weren't for him, the Wang family would have fallen into a great crisis. Furthermore, the reason why Zhao Fengchen and Shen Huai sought him out was also due to Wang Chong. Chong, or what do you want to say? Li Lin said. Uncle, if possible, don't go to the west gate. Following Zhao Fengchen is much more useful than going to the west gate. Wang Chong said solemnly. But Zhao Fengchen might not agree to it. Regardless of whether he was heading to the west gate or following Zhao Fengchen, Li Lin felt as though he was in a dream. These are not things you can go to whenever you want to. Don't worry, he will agree. Wang Chong smiled and drew his sword with a clang. The moment the sword was unsheathed, a cold wave rolled in the room, and a sharp chi-ji traversed the void, as if it wanted to cut the room in half. Hiss! Seeing the cold gleam on the sword in Wang Chong's hand, Li Lin took in a deep breath. All along, he couldn't understand why Zhao Fengchen would spend 40,000 gold taels to buy a sword, and he couldn't understand why Wang Chong was so confident that Zhao Fengchen would help him. However, upon seeing the Wuxia steel sword in Wang Chong's hand, Li Lin suddenly understood. Even though he didn't know much about swordsmanship, he could tell that the sword in Wang Chong's hand was different from any of the swords in the market. Wang Chong had only taken out this sword, not even pointing it at him, but Li Lin already felt an extreme sense of danger. Chong, why do you have such a sharp sword? Li Lin couldn't help but ask. Uncle, you don't have to worry about that. Tell Zhao Fengchen that I don't need 40,000 gold taels. I can sell this sword to him at the same price as before, 35,000 gold taels. Since Zhao Fengchen knows how to make use of you to approach me, given his intelligence, he should be able to understand my intentions. Wang Chong chuckled. The matter regarding the Hyderabad ores wasn't inexplicable, just that it was troublesome. When the time came, the people here would be able to figure it out. Chonger, thank you. Li Lin didn't ask any further. This nephew of his had given him too many surprises. Hearing his words, Li Lin didn't find it strange at all. Taking Wang Chong's Wuxia steel sword with him, Li Lin left the Wang family residence. Walala! When Wang Chong's uncle, Li Lin, left the Wang family residence with the Wuxia steel sword, under the veil of night, countless pigeons gathered from all directions and flew into the inns and taverns. What? Nothing. I can't find anything. There's no news regarding that sword. You can't find the source of the sword? None of the swordsmiths have seen such a sword before? There's no news at all. There's no change in the boundaries. While Wang Chong was relaxing and practicing his martial arts, unbeknownst to anyone, countless swordsmiths and prestigious clans were exerting all of their efforts and resources to search for news regarding the Wuxia steel sword. Everyone thought that since the 4 great swordsmithing clans didn't know of the Wuxia steel sword, the sword must have originated from somewhere outside the capital. Due to the long-distance transportation, there was bound to be a leak. However, despite the efforts of the thousands of swordsmithing clans, they couldn't find any news regarding Wang Chong's Wuxia steel sword. From the looks of it, it was as though the sword was unique, and there was only one in Wang Chong's hand. Impossible! This news left many dumbfounded. They couldn't accept it. When the news spread, the Wuxia steel sword in Wang Chong's hand suddenly became incomparably valuable. Have you found anything? At the same time, a figure wearing a white mask stood on the peak of a mountain in the outskirts of the city. Around him, there were many figures standing tall. Lord, we've found it. That Wang Chong is the descendant of Duke Zhou of the Tang dynasty. We've already found the Wang family residence. However, the Wang family residence is heavily guarded, and the imperial army is patrolling the capital. It won't be easy for us to enter. A voice replied, but it wasn't in the language of the Central Plains. The group of people spoke in the language of the western regions. Under the moonlight, Zhang Xian could clearly see that these people had high noses and deep eyes. Every single one of them had a scimitar hanging by their waist. They were all from the Abbasid Caliphate in Karak Spazinu. You fools, do you think that we're here to wipe out the Wang family? Swords and sabers don't appear out of thin air. Since he forged them, there must be more than one of them, and he must have left behind quite a few ores and materials. Our goal is to steal these swords and materials. As long as we achieve our goal, we can end the battle as soon as possible. How many guards and Imperial Army soldiers do we have? That sword is extremely important to our Spazinu. Regardless of the price we have to pay, you must bring one of them over. The leader wearing a white mask said viciously. His final words revealed his identity. Other than the Spazinu merchant Mozade, who had met Wang Chong once before, there was no one else who would dare to do such a thing. Yes, Lord. Under the moonlight, the group lowered their heads. Soon they turned around and disappeared into the night sky. The sun rose and the moon set. In the blink of an eye, a day had passed. Papa! In the Wang family residence, Wang Chong flicked his hands repeatedly, and as though two pythons, he moved them in the midst of a raging gale. Every single strike was incomparably heavy. Papa, wherever Wang Chong's elbow and arm landed, the sturdy fake mountain in the courtyard would shatter, and rocks would scatter all over the place. Ever since Wang Chong had placed his focus on martial arts, he had been cultivating for a longer period of time each day, and his strength had grown stronger as well. Complementing the Herculean fist with the dragon bone art, Wang Chong could feel his cultivation improving every single day. Given time, it wouldn't be a problem for him to reach Origin Energy Tier 6. Once one's cultivation reached Origin Energy Tier 6, everything would change. One would be able to cultivate secret arts that could raise one's strength, speed, or dexterity. Once one's cultivation reached that level, the feeling that Wang Chong was experiencing right now would be completely different. Young master, something bad has happened. There's someone outside. Just as Wang Chong was cultivating, a flurry of footsteps sounded. Shinhai and Menglong rushed in from outside. What's wrong? Wang Chong frowned. Exhaling deeply, he slowly retracted his cultivation. He remembered telling Shinhai and Menglong not to disturb him when he was cultivating. Young master, there's someone outside. Shinhai said. Is there a need to make such a fuss? Wang Chong frowned. Young master, you'll know once you take a look outside. Shinhai and Menglong said. The duo hesitated. At the entrance of the Wang family residence, Wang Chong finally saw the person that the duo was talking about. Facing the entrance of the Wang family residence, a 7-chi tall brawny man was kneeling on the floor with his head lowered. Young master, this fellow has been here since early in the morning, clamoring to meet me. We were afraid that he would wake madam up, so we had no choice but to call you over. Shinhai and Menglong said helplessly. Wang Chong didn't pay much attention to the person at first, but when he took a second look, his heart skipped a beat. It's you? Wang Chong was astonished. He recognized this person. This person was none other than the full-bearded brawny man who had leaped down from the 3rd floor of the Blue Bottle Pavilion and hacked at Wei Hao. In the end, his sword was severed and he collapsed to the ground, spurting blood. He was one of the participants in the sword duel gamble that day. Wang Chong couldn't understand why he would appear here, kneeling at the entrance of his residence. Gongzi, you must accept me as your disciple. If you don't agree to it, I will kneel here forever. The full-bearded brawny man lowered his head and said earnestly. Hua! Wang Chong's mind was instantly thrown into turmoil by this declaration, and he felt an indescribable sensation. He suddenly understood why Shinhai and Menglong came to look for him. Accept him as his disciple? You must be joking. He was only 15, and he should be at the age to acknowledge others as his teacher. Yet, there was someone who wanted to acknowledge him as his teacher. Gongzi, I'm not asking you to teach me martial arts. I only hope that you can teach me your swordsmithing skills. As long as Gongzi agrees to it, I am willing to be at your beck and call. I am willing to serve Gongzi forever. The full-bearded brawny man's voice was deep. As he spoke, he respectfully lifted a broken sword high above his head and remained motionless. It's the 4-chi broadsword that was severed. Wang Chong took a glance and suddenly realized that the sword in the full-bearded brawny man's hands was the 4-chi broadsword that he had slashed at Wei Hao with the Wuxia steel sword. For some reason, in the hands of the full-bearded brawny man, the broken sword seemed to weigh 1,000 jin. Wang Chong could even smell a sorrowful aura from the tall figure. This sorrowful aura was something that Wang Chong had smelled on many people before. In his previous life, when the central plains fell and the earth shattered, Wang Chong also felt the same sorrowful aura. In that instant, Wang Chong suddenly understood. Just like how the mission was to him, to the 7 chi tall brawny man kneeling on the floor, swordsmithing was his dream as well. Chapter 68. What's your name? Wang Chong asked. My name is Tuobaguan. Gongzi can also be called Zhangguan. Kneeling on the floor, Tuobaguan said. It's him. Upon hearing those words, Wang Chong's heart jolted. He stared at the full-bearded brawny man in astonishment. Wang Chong didn't know Tuobaguan, nor did he have any relationship with him. However, Wang Chong knew of this person. In his previous life, he was the most famous swordsmith in the Central Plains. He didn't join any power, and even the Zhang, Lu, Cheng, and Huang clans were rejected by him. This infuriated the clans, and they banded together to blacklist him. However, with his own capability, he made a name for himself in the capital. As long as the sword he forged was labeled with the name Guiyuan, he would be able to sell it at a price even higher than those of the major swordsmithing clans. Before the catastrophe, he was publicly acknowledged as the #1 swordsmith in the Tang dynasty. When the Wuxia steel weapons became famous throughout the world, his greatest achievement was forging the Guiyuan sword, which even the Wuxia steel weapons were unable to break easily. Furthermore, it was forged using ordinary materials. The only problem was that the forging of the sword required a complicated process and craftsmanship. Even Tuobaguan wasn't able to forge many of them. Thereafter, when the catastrophe occurred, Tuobaguan lost all his chances. Wang Chong didn't expect that the person kneeling before him would be the #1 swordsmith in the world. SSS. Wang Chong took in a deep breath. This was truly an unexpected harvest. It seemed like his auction of the Wuxia steel sword at the Bluebottle Pavilion and the fight for the title of #1 sword in the world had not only attracted the attention of the prestigious clans and weapon merchants, it had also attracted the attention of the #1 swordsmith in the world. This was something that Wang Chong couldn't have imagined. One must know that Tuobaguan's personality was extremely violent. Just like a herd of wild horses, it was impossible for him to submit to any clan. The fact that many swordsmithing clans were rejected in his previous life was proof of this. If he hadn't used the hunger marketing method in his previous life to sell his swords at the Bluebottle Pavilion, he would have missed out on the opportunity to meet the future #1 swordsmith. This is too unexpected. Although I have forged the Wuxia steel sword, it is based on the memories of my past life and the knowledge of the future. Moreover, forging swords is not my main profession. If there's someone to share the burden with me, that person will be able to share a lot of the burden. Wang Chong's heart was in turmoil. He was just about to agree, but he didn't expect that the rewards would be so much more than he expected. If he had the help of a future top swordsmith, he would be able to carry out a bigger plan. In terms of swordsmithing, Tuobaguan was the best choice. Get up, Wang Chong said. Young master, please promise me. Tuobaguan was still kneeling on the ground stubbornly. I've already promised you, Wang Chong said. Ah! Tuobaguan lifted his head in shock. Disbelief was written all over his face. All swordsmiths and prestigious clans were extremely secretive about their swordsmithing, and they wouldn't easily divulge their secrets to others. Tuobaguan had heard that the Wang clan was a clan of ministers and generals, and it was even more prestigious than the other swordsmithing clans. It wasn't easy to enter the Wang clan. Thus, he had already mentally prepared himself that he would have to go through a huge ordeal before he could enter the Wang clan. Just that, Tuobaguan didn't expect it to be so easy. He had only knelt for a moment before agreeing to it. It was so easy that it was unbelievable. Is Gongzi for real? Tuobaguan still couldn't believe it. Of course. Wang Chong smiled. He stretched out his hands, intending to help Tuobaguan up. However, he realized that Tuobaguan didn't budge at all, as though he was rooted to the ground. This fellow is an expert. Wang Chong widened his eyes in shock. He possessed an Origin Energy Tier 5 cultivation realm. Even though it wasn't too high, he could easily shatter a boulder with just a jolt. For him to be unable to help Tuobaguan kneeling on the ground, it was clear that the other party's strength far surpassed his. However, thinking about it, It was impossible for Tuoba Guiyuan to become the #1 swordsmith in the world despite being suppressed by several prestigious swordsmithing clans in his previous life. Thank you Gongzi. As long as Gongzi is willing to teach me swordsmithing, I'm willing to serve Gongzi for the rest of my life. Tuoba Guiyuan wasn't aware of Wang Chong's thoughts. Upon hearing that Wang Chong had agreed to it, Tuoba Guiyuan was delighted. He immediately kowtowed to the other party, and pung. Tuoba Guiyuan wasn't someone who would lower his head easily, but that depended on what it was. As long as he could learn the best swordsmithing technique, Tuoba Guiyuan was willing to pay any price. After kowtowing, Tuoba Guiyuan stood up on his own without Wang Chong's help. Shinhai, go back and report what happened here to mother. Wang Chong turned around and said. Ever since the incident with Yao Guangyi, his mother had been lax with him. As long as it didn't affect the family, his mother wouldn't interfere in many matters. Yes Gongzi, Shinhai replied and left. Tuoba Guiyuan, since you wish to follow me, you will be a member of the Wang clan from now on. Menglong, prepare a side room for him. Wang Chong said. After which, Wang Chong headed for the Ghost Tree district alone. Thus, Yung Sun's matter was still a secret and no one knew the truth. Before there was any progress in this matter, Wang Chong didn't wish for too many people to notice his existence. Thus he didn't bring Shinhai, Menglong, or Tuoba Guiyuan with him. Wang Chong was extremely careful. He didn't head straight to the Ghost Tree district. Instead, he strolled around the area and after confirming that no one was tailing him, he headed to the Ghost Tree district stealthily. A massive locust tree stood at the center of the square, and its canopy was spread open like an umbrella. In this place, the elderly and children were busy entertaining themselves. As such, no one noticed Wang Chong walking among them. Beneath the locust tree, Wang Chong saw the gold-plated chessboard once more. Thus Yung Sun still didn't appear. However, there was an additional stone on the chessboard. A white stone. Little fellow, what's your name? Wang Chong looked at the child beside the chessboard and patted his head. Undai Jianjian. They call me Jianjian. Carrying the locust tree on his back, the little fellow licked a stick of candied hawthorn and replied absent-mindedly. Jianjian. Wang Chong chuckled. He found this child adorable and was about to compliment him when a thought flashed across his mind. Wang Chong was stunned. He had heard of this name before. Back then, when the old servant of the Su residence told him about the past, he had mentioned this name. So Yung Sun rarely accepted disciples in his life. Those who could catch his eye were few and far between. But in his life, there were still a few who were barely able to catch his eye and almost became his disciples. Although these people were not chosen by So Yung Sun in the end, So Yung Sun had given them pointers in martial arts, and each of them had achieved great achievements. This Dai Jianjian was one of them. The art of god and demon obliteration was said to be a mystical art in the world. It was a great art of slaughter, and even immortals and Buddhas avoided it. It had extremely high requirements for one's innate talent and bone structure. Most of the time, even if So Yung Sun wanted to spread the word, the other party might not be able to cultivate it. Forcefully cultivating would only do more harm than good. Although Dai Jianjian was not chosen by old Mr. Su due to his lack of talent, he was not accepted into the sect. However, he was the only one that old Mr. Su had taken a liking to and kept by his side, even giving him some pointers on martial arts. It's his doorman. Wang Chong suddenly came to a realization. The old servant once said that although So Yung Sun had never accepted a disciple in his life, he accidentally picked a child and took him in as a doorman. This child brought So Yung Sun a lot of joy in his later years. So Yung Sun liked him a lot. But it was a pity that he died together with So Yung Sun in that great turmoil. The child had always treated So Yung Sun as his grandfather. During that great turmoil, the old servant once wanted to call him away, but the child hugged So Yung Sun's corpse and refused to leave. In the end, he died together with So Yung Sun. When the old servant recounted the past, tears flowed down his face and he cried bitterly. Listening by the side, Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh. But Wang Chong did not expect to see him here. Looking at the child who was engrossed in licking the candied haws, Wang Chong's feelings were completely different. When that happened, he should only be in his teens. Wang Chong thought to himself. Su Zhengchen was still in the midst of looking for a disciple. Clearly, It was only after suffering many setbacks that he truly noticed this child. Life is short, and many things are discovered after missing them. Wang Chong suddenly decided to do something to change the fate of So Young's son and this child. "Little guy, do something for me." "What is it?" The child raised his head and said absent-mindedly as he continued to eat his candied haws, "If you can make that old grandpa laugh and make him happy, I will give you a silver ingot every day." "Ah." The child finally moved his eyes away from the candied haws. He tilted his head and stared at Wang Chong, his eyes wide open. Although he was young, he knew that a silver ingot could buy him a lot of candied haws. "Really?" the child said in disbelief. "Of course." Wang Chong nodded his head and said seriously, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. So Young's son was an elder of 3 dynasties, a god of war, and the #1 expert in the army. Although his life was full of legends, it was also full of tragedy. He had never been happy in his life, and this sorrow and misfortune from birth to death ran through his entire life. So Young's son was the descendant of an important minister of the former Sui dynasty, and he had the bloodline of a princess of the Sui dynasty. So Young's son may have made great contributions, but this was the source of his misfortune. When Su Zhengchen was still a lowly figure, no one had mentioned this bloodline in his body. But when he was at the zenith of his achievements, consecutively defeating the Turks, Yusang and Goguryeo, and expanding the borders of the Great Tang to the north of the Yin Mountains, this bloodline immediately became a fatal flaw. In So Young's son's life, there were many times when he was falsely accused of plotting a rebellion to overthrow the Tang dynasty and rebuild the Sui Empire. In any dynasty, this was a huge taboo. Chapter 69. In order to avoid suspicion at the pinnacle of his life, So Young's son chose to hand over his military authority and retreat bravely. He lived alone in the Su residence and refused to meet any guests. He severed all ties with the military commanders and the important officials of the royal court. In order to uphold the loyalty of Emperor Taizong, So Young's son even gave up on his martial arts cultivation. From then on, no one could hear the sound of war or any ripples of origin energy in the Su residence. He allowed himself to grow old like an ordinary person. The gates of the Su residence were tightly shut all year round, as though a wall had formed, isolating the outside world and So Young's son himself. So Young's son's tragedy had only just begun. If one were to say that So Young's son could still endure the criticism of the officials when he was at the pinnacle of his life, then losing his son in his middle age was a heavy blow to him. So Young's son might have retreated from the royal court, but he didn't forbid his son from working for the royal court. This was what he regretted the most. And when So Young's son's only grandson died as well, So Young's son suffered a fatal blow. From then on, his life was filled with endless sorrow and pain. From then on, the old servant had never seen So Young's son smile again. When the old servant spoke of this matter, he couldn't help but wipe away his tears. A great war god who had contributed greatly to the expansion of the Central Plains should not meet such a fate. So Young's son had never been happy in his life, and this absent-minded child who was licking the candied haws was the only happiness he had in the latter half of his life, even though this happiness only lasted for a few short years. Life was short. Regardless of whether he could obtain So Young's son's legacy or not, Wang Chong hoped that this war god would be able to be happy. Perhaps bringing this happiness forward by a few years through his own hands was the best way to show respect to him. Remember, you aren't allowed to tell this matter to old Mr. Wang Chong patted the child's head and tossed him a silver ingot from his sleeve. Then he placed a new black chess piece on the gold-plated chessboard. So Young's son only had one chance. If he made one mistake, he would lose the whole game. As long as the chess piece was placed in the wrong place, it would never be faded again in the future. Wang Chong had already lost a stone, but he was not eliminated. Instead, he gave himself a second black stone. Wang Chong knew that he had successfully attracted the attention of the old marshal. Leaving behind the black piece, Wang Chong turned around and left the Ghost Tree district once more. So Young's son's art of god and demon obliteration was known as the most difficult supreme art to obtain. Back then, so many old marshals, including the late emperor, were all mercilessly rejected, let alone himself. Wang Chong did not think that he could obtain the legacy of this war god just by playing a few games of chess. However, as long as he could attract his attention and make some progress, that would be enough. While Wang Chong was leaving the Ghost Tree district, in the Yao residence, Yao Feng wasn't idling around either. Wang Yin, Wang Bei, Wang Chong. One day, I'll make your Wang clan vanish to the ground to pay for the humiliation you have inflicted on our Yao clan. Yao Feng clenched his fists tightly and swept the items on the table onto the floor. The atmosphere in the Yao residence was heavy, extremely heavy. Ever since his father, Yao Guangyi, suffered a setback by the borders and lost to Wang Ji, the atmosphere in the Yao residence had been extremely heavy. The old master of the Four Quarters Embassy had ordered that no one from the Yao clan was to cause trouble outside. The old master of the Four Quarters Embassy had ordered that no one from the Yao clan was to cause trouble outside. Ever since that day, the gates of the Yao clan had been tightly shut. Even Yao Feng's movements were restricted, and he was forbidden from leaving. This was the first time in his life that something like this had happened. To the prideful Yao Feng, this was a heavy blow. Yao Feng knew the reason behind this. It was because the old master didn't wish to attract the attention of that clan after coming to a truce with the Wang clan. Right now, Yao Feng didn't need to leave to know that he had become a laughingstock among the other scions. Yao Feng had always been proud of his demeanor, and this matter was a huge humiliation. No matter what, our Yao clan can't take this lying down. Yao Feng thought hatefully. In the vast crane pavilion, Yao Feng had suffered a huge loss in the hands of the Wang clan siblings. However, Yao Feng didn't make a move, nor did he try to exact revenge. This wasn't because Yao Feng was magnanimous. Rather, Yao Feng was instructed by his father not to cause unnecessary trouble. The scheme of his father and King Qi wasn't a secret to Yao Feng. As long as his father succeeded, the entire Wang clan would vanish in an instant. This was also the reason why Yao Feng had been tolerating the matter. For the sake of the bigger picture, he would try his best not to make a move. However, Yao Feng didn't expect that after waiting for so long, instead of receiving news of his father's victory at the border and the discord between the Wang clan and the King of Song, he received news of his father making a fool of himself at the border and becoming a laughingstock in the capital. Even his grandfather, whom he had always respected since young, had to lower his head to the Wang clan old master in order to appease the repercussions of this matter. When he received the news, Yao Feng's heart was bleeding. The Yao clan was like the sun in the sky, and they had the protection of King Qi. When had they ever experienced such humiliation? However, this wasn't the end. Soon, his father passed down the order for the Yao clan to close their doors to avoid the storm. After enduring for 10 days, Yao Feng couldn't take it any longer. No, I have to speak to my father. Our Yao clan can't tolerate such humiliation. Yao Feng left the study and headed straight for his father, Yao Guangyi's study. In order to deal with the Wang clan, Yao Feng felt that he had to have a good talk with his father. Lord, I've just received news that the Wang clan's Wang Chong has appeared at the Bluebottle Pavilion. Just as he arrived at his father's study, Yao Feng heard a familiar voice from afar. It's Guard Zhou. Yao Feng stopped in his tracks. Guard Zhou was his father's trusted aide, and he was in charge of gathering all news in the capital. Yao Feng didn't expect to hear news of the youngest son of the Wang clan, Wang Chong, from his mouth. Yao Feng stopped in his tracks and was about to listen carefully when he heard a long sigh. There's no need to speak. Father has ordered that our Yao clan shouldn't offend the Wang clan for the time being. In the future, don't report any news regarding the Wang clan to me. His father's heavy voice sounded from the door, and it was filled with deep fatigue. Yes. Guard Zhou fell silent for a moment before keeping his mouth shut. Yao Feng stood at the door, and his face suddenly turned pale. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Yao Feng wouldn't have believed that this was the confident, steady, and intelligent father in his mind. Yao Feng knew the reason. His father had lost the war by the borders. His father had always looked down on Wang Chong's father. However, this time, his father had suffered a crushing defeat. Furthermore, it was in the scheme that he was most proficient in. His father didn't reveal the slightest hint of this matter to keep it a secret. It was impossible for the Wang clan to obtain news from him. However, this was precisely the reason why his father suffered such a huge blow. If he couldn't find out who was helping the Wang clan from the shadows, If he couldn't understand how he lost, it would be hard for his father to stand up again. Wang Yan, I can't deal with you. I can't deal with your two sons either. However, I can deal with your younger one. Recalling how he was beaten up by Wang Chong in the vast crane pavilion, Yao Feng's face turned red and his hatred for the Wang clan intensified. Grandfather told them to restrain themselves and his father ordered him not to offend the Wang clan for the time being. Yao Feng knew that it wasn't a wise move to deal with Wang Chong now. However, to Yao Feng, there was no need for him to deal with the Wang clan personally. Thinking so, Yao Feng sneered coldly. He turned around and left the Yao clan secretly. He knew of a place where there was a formidable assassin who could help him accomplish all of this without anyone noticing. That afternoon, Zhao Fengshan's 35,000 gold taels was sent to Wang Chong. When it was sent over, Wang Chong's uncle Li Lin was delighted. He praised Wang Chong several times. He had complete trust in Wang Chong. Wang Chong didn't take all of the 35,000 gold taels with him. Instead, he left half of it for his uncle. He asked his uncle to keep it for him. Other than that, Wang Chong had some ideas. He wanted his uncle to help him deal with this matter. This way, he would be spared from a lot of trouble. Naturally, Uncle Li Lin nodded his head in agreement. Through this matter, the relationship between uncle and nephew grew closer. Chong, you have so much money now. To the Wang clan, this is an unimaginably huge sum of money. Have you thought about how you are going to spend it in the future? Furthermore, it's inconvenient for you to stay in the Wang clan. You might accidentally bring trouble upon yourself. Have you thought about finding a place to live in? While they were chatting in the carriage, Uncle Li Lin suddenly mentioned this matter. He wasn't blind. There were many things that Wang Chong was hiding from him. However, these matters were a blessing to the Wang clan. Moreover, Li Lin could also sense that although his nephew was young, his ambition was not small. The things he was doing were getting bigger and bigger. Based on his experience, Li Lin felt that there were many problems within. Wang Chong didn't notice these problems himself, but Li Lin could. For example, Duke Zhou's lineage had always been incorruptible. Would Wang Chong suddenly obtain such a huge sum of money raise unnecessary suspicions? Even though Wang Chong's wealth came from a legitimate source, it might cause unnecessary trouble for the Wang clan. These were all things that needed to be considered. Uncle, I'll leave this matter to you. Wang Chong said that he was also thinking about this matter. There were many things that were becoming more and more inconvenient for him to do at home. Furthermore, just like what Uncle Li Lin said, there were some things that would be fine if he handled them well, but if he didn't, it might bring trouble to the clan. Putting everything else aside, 30,000 gold taels was something that might attract the covetous eyes of others. This was also the reason why he gave half of the gold taels to Uncle Li Lin. Also, don't tell my mother about this matter yet, Wang Chong said. Don't worry. Li Lin smiled and said with a doting expression. The more he looked at this nephew of his, the more he liked him. If not for Wang Chong, he would have continued to hold that position for many years. Thus, out of gratitude and as a kinsman, no matter what Wang Chong did, Li Lin approved of it. Furthermore, if the clan were to learn of what Wang Chong had done, he might be restricted or supervised. As a mother, it was inevitable that she would worry about him. This way, Wang Chong wouldn't be able to do as he pleased. Thus, Li Lin was in favor of Wang Chong keeping this matter a secret for now. You can talk to your mother about this later. It'll be the same. Also, Lord Zhao asked me to pass this invitation to you. He said that if you are free, he would like to invite you to the Imperial Army. Chapter 70. Uncle Li Lin handed the invitation to Wang Chong and left. Wang Chong pondered for a moment, then he brought along 17,000 gold taels and headed straight for the Duke of Wei's mansion. Unlike the Wang Chong clan, the Duke of Wei had a wide range of businesses. He helped Ablanadin and Arloja gather a large amount of rations to transport to Sindhu in the west. Such a large project involved many aspects, and it wasn't something that Wang Chong could accomplish alone. In this aspect, Wei Hao was much better than him. Although Wei Hao wasn't powerful enough to make all the decisions in the Wei family's affairs, Wei Hao didn't care. However, as long as it didn't involve Wei Kingdom's main business and it was just some insignificant matters, such as selling swords at the Blue Bottle Pavilion, Wei Hao, as the young master of the Wei clan, was still able to make the decision. There was no need for the Duke of Wei's permission. Wang Chong didn't need the Wei family to do anything. He just needed to use their network of business channels throughout the country to purchase some food. Going all the way to the west, after a while he saw a huge mansion. It was splendid and magnificent. On the signboard above the door, there was a black and gold word Wei, which clearly indicated the identity of this family. This was the Duke of Wei's mansion. Even though Wang Chong and Wei Hao were childhood friends, they grew up together. However, Wang Chong rarely came to the Duke of Wei's mansion. The reason was simple. Wang Chong's father Wang Yan and Wei Hao's father Wei Yuan did not get along. When Wang Chong and Wei Hao were young, the two families had a good relationship. However, after Wei Hao's father was conferred the title of Duke of Wei, everything changed. The Duke of Wei and his father were both very stubborn, and they often clashed with Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang Zhen, in the royal court. As a result, the relationship between the two clans grew increasingly strained. On the other hand, the relationship between Wang Chong and Wei Hao was not affected. Adults play with adults and children play with children. It was just that he couldn't go to the Duke of Wei's mansion. Duke of Wei's personality was different from his father's. Although his father didn't have a good relationship with Duke of Wei, Wei Hao was always welcome to the Wang family. Wang Chong's mother would also smile and affectionately call him Xiaonian and prepare a plate of pastries for him. In the Wang clan, the matters of the adults would never involve the children. However, the Duke of Wei was different. He loved the house and its crow, and hated the house and its crow. He didn't like Wang Chong's father Wang Yan, so he didn't like Wang Chong as well. That was also the reason why Wei Hao was placed under house arrest when Wang Chong caused a huge uproar. The Duke of Wei had even sent word that Wang Chong was strictly forbidden from stepping foot into the Wei family. However, this posed no threat to Wang Chong at all. Wang Chong found a gate guard that Wei Hao had bribed and passed the message in. Soon Wei Hao came out. "Wang Chong, why are you here?" Wei Hao hurriedly ran out. As he walked, his eyes were filled with surprise. In the past, Wang Chong would always go to the Eight Gods Pavilion to look for him, and he rarely came to his house. After so long, this was the first time Wang Chong came to the Duke of Wei's mansion. "Stop wasting time and get on the carriage. I have something to talk to you about." Wang Chong beckoned him over and chided jokingly. You came at the right time. I have something to talk to you about as well," Wei Hao said. "Oh." Wang Chong was surprised. The two childhood friends who had grown up together boarded the carriage, closed the door, and the carriage moved forward. "Wang Chong, you asked me to look for a fellow named Zhang Munian. Tell me, why are you looking for him?" Upon entering the carriage, before Wang Chong could say anything, Wei Hao had already spoken up with a grim expression. "You found him?" Wang Chong's body jolted, and his face warped. When Wang Chong was looking for Wei Hao, he had been smiling all along. However, at this moment, he retracted his smile and a grim expression appeared on his face. Zhang Munian was an important part of his plan. To him, he was even more important than the Hyderabad ores and the art of god and demon obliteration. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that even though Wang Chong didn't put much effort into Zhang Munian, he was the one whom Wang Chong was most concerned about. "I found him." Wei Hao nodded his head. He had grown up together with Wang Chong, so he couldn't be any more familiar with the latter. He immediately sensed the change in Wang Chong's body, and his entire person turned solemn. But even if he were to die, he couldn't understand why Wang Chong would place so much importance on an insignificant figure like Zhang Munian. "But let me tell you this first. I didn't find him in the list of officials but in the death prison," Wei Hao said grimly. "Death prison?" Wang Chong was taken aback. If that wasn't the case, I wouldn't have spent so much time looking for him. If I wasn't meticulous enough to flip through his name book, I might not have noticed him at all. This is the dossier I had someone make on him. Take a look." Wei Hao carefully took out a dossier from his bosom and tossed it over. The dossier was wrapped tightly in a yellow leather pouch. Clearly, Wang Chong had put in a lot of effort into it. Initially, Wei Hao didn't care much about such things. What he was interested in was martial arts. But as long as this matter was entrusted to him by Wang Chong, he would definitely do his best to carry it out. "Wang Chong, it's not that I want to criticize you, but this person's situation is extremely unique. An insignificant official like him actually embezzled more than 20,000 gold taels. Isn't this a joke? Aren't you being too brazen? I believe you should know how the royal court deals with such corrupt officials. This person has been marked by the Bureau of Punishments, and he will be executed soon. Once his name is on the list, even if my father is the current Duke of the royal court, he won't be able to get out. Even though I don't know why you're looking for him, Wang Chong, listen to my words of advice. Don't pursue this matter any further. A person won't be sent to the death prison for no reason. There must be a reason behind the royal court's betrayal. Getting too close to such a person isn't a good thing for you or the Wang clan. Wei Hao didn't expect that the person Wang Chong was looking for would be a death convict. He wasn't worried about him, but the Wang clan had always been incorruptible, and Duke Zhou was highly respected. Wei Hao was worried that if Wang Chong were to get involved in this matter, it would become an excuse for others to attack the Wang clan. Having grown up in such a noble clan, Wei Hao had seen too many political struggles. Thus he understood a thing or two. A tall tree attracts the wind. It wasn't a good thing for Wang Chong to get involved with a death convict. Wang Chong didn't say a word. With a grim expression, he flipped open Zhang Munian's dossier and began reading through it. The Tang dynasty was a flourishing empire, and they were extremely careful with the approval of death convicts. All information had to be checked thoroughly before they dared to sign their names. As such, the information on Zhang Munian was extremely detailed. To think that he's already 54. Wang Chong looked through the information on the dossier. Zhang Munian was much older than he thought, and he was already nearing his twilight years. The dossier was extremely detailed on his embezzlement. The evidence of embezzlement of more than 20,000 gold taels was clear. Considering that he was a lowly official, the fact that he was able to take advantage of a loophole to embezzle so much was truly shocking. This was also the reason why the Bureau of Punishment signed his name and sentenced him to death. However, there were some suspicious points in the dossier. 20,000 gold taels wasn't a small sum. To an ordinary clan, it was a sum that more than a dozen households could spend in their entire lifetime. Yet, despite Zhang Munian's embezzlement, there wasn't a single shred of gold on him. His attire was still extremely simple, and his food and drink were the same as his colleagues. Other than that, when the Bureau of Punishment searched through his residence, they found that he lived in an old muddy house. Other than a rice vat, 2 wardrobes and a bed, there was nothing else in the house. The officials dispatched by the Bureau of Punishments were unable to find the 20,000 gold taels even after digging 3 feet into the ground. No one knew where he had secretly buried it. Even though the Bureau of Punishments had their doubts, in order to make an example out of Zhang Munian, as well as the fact that Zhang Munian had confessed to the crime, the Bureau of Punishments decided to sentence him to death. At this point, Wang Chong finally understood the situation. Wang Chong's feelings toward Zhang Munian didn't change in the slightest. On the contrary, his desire to save him intensified. However, Wei Hao wasn't wrong. Zhang Munian's condition was already set in stone, and his death was certain. Regardless of whether it was the Wei clan or their Wang clan, neither of them had the capability to rescue someone from the death prison of the Bureau of Punishments. However, Wang Chong knew that there was still a sliver of hope for this matter. Looks like I can only look for the King of Song. A person suddenly appeared in Wang Chong's mind. The King of Song was a member of the royal family, and his words carried great weight in the royal court. This was something that Wang Chong's father Wang Yan, big uncle Wang Zhen, and Wei Hao's father Wei Yuan couldn't compare to. More importantly, Wang Chong happened to know that the King of Song had a certain level of jurisdiction over the Bureau of Punishments. If he were to step in this matter, the outcome would be completely different. Wei Hao, you don't have to bother about this matter. I'll deal with it myself. Wang Chong kept Zhang Munian's scroll in his embrace. Wei Hao nodded his head. Thinking that Wang Chong had given up on the matter, his mood lightened up. Right, what matter do you have for me? Hearing Wei Hao's question, Wang Chong couldn't help but chuckle. Youngster Wei, it's not that I want to nag at you, but you got beaten up again, right? Why? Is that cousin of yours here again? Wang Chong chuckled as he stared at the red scar at the corner of Wei Hao's eyes. This scar was still fresh, and he had noticed it the moment Wei Hao boarded the carriage. Even though Wei Hao had tried his best to conceal it with a strand of his hair, How could he hide it from Wang Chong's sharp eyes? Wei Hao's act was exposed by Wang Chong, and he collapsed in an instant. What nonsense are you talking about? I accidentally knocked against the door frame when I was leaving the house. Wei Hao tried his best to conceal the matter. In the end, it only made Wang Chong laugh even louder. Here, this is for you. Take it back and study it carefully. Cultivate it well. Wang Chong took out a book from nowhere and tossed it over to Wei Hao. What's this? Wei Hao caught it with both hands as he asked curiously. After flipping through 2 pages, his face warped in agitation. Martial arts technique. Why do you have this? Chapter 71. Wei Hao was a martial arts fanatic. However, his mediocre aptitude meant that he had no fate with most martial arts. This was something that even the Duke of Wei could not change. Therefore, Wei Hao's desire for power was unimaginable. Wei Hao did not expect Wang Chong to give him a martial arts manual. In this era of martial arts, other than those martial arts that were publicized, any martial arts manual was priceless. No faction would give it away easily. Wei Hao was pleasantly surprised. Wei Hao flipped through the manual page by page. At first, he was just casually flipping through it. However, he gradually became engrossed in it and was completely captivated. Although he had not cultivated it yet, Wei Hao could feel that the martial arts Wang Chong gave him were much more powerful than what he was currently cultivating. Seeing Wei Hao slowly become engrossed in it, even his breathing became faintly discernible. Wang Chong nodded and smiled in his heart. Wang Chong had always been filled with guilt towards Wei Hao. Wei Hao had always treated him as his best brother. However, due to various reasons, they had a misunderstanding and parted ways, losing this friend. Even so, Wei Hao never gave up on him. In his previous life, Wei Hao ignored his family's opposition and helped him and his family during his most difficult time. At that time, Wang Chong could not help Wei Hao at all. They could only watch helplessly as Wei Hao was washed away by the torrent of the era and the catastrophe, just like the others. In this life, Wang Chong had always wanted to do something for him. Martial arts had always been Wei Hao's weakness. However, his mediocre aptitude limited him. Even the Duke of Wei could not change it. Therefore, even at his final moments, Wei Hao was never strong. Wang Chong had always wanted to help him, but it was not easy to find a suitable martial art manual for him. According to Wei Hao's situation, Wang Chong spent a long time recalling all the martial arts manuals in his mind. Finally, he found one that was suitable for Wei Hao. This was also the reason why Wang Chong only gave it to him after being reborn for so long. Time passed slowly. Wei Hao was engrossed in reading. Wang Chong didn't disturb him and just sat quietly in the carriage. Who? After an unknown amount of time, Wei Hao let out a long sigh and finally lifted his head from the scroll. Mountain Ascension Incantation? What a strange name. Why haven't I heard of it before? Wang Chong, where did you learn such powerful martial arts? Wei Hao looked at Wang Chong in astonishment. It was as if he did not know him at all. Wei Hao didn't know why, but when he flipped open the manual, he felt especially fond of it. It was as if there was a strange force pulling him in, causing him to keep reading. Wei Hao only let out a long sigh of relief when he was done. Wei Hao didn't know where Wang Chong got his martial arts from, but it was obvious that this wasn't the style of the Wang family. It was completely unorthodox. But for some reason, Wei Hao liked it very much. When he flipped through it, he had a feeling that it was tailor-made for him, which made him feel very excited. What, you don't like it? Give it back. Wang Chong stretched out his hand with a straight face. Scram. What you gave to me is mine. Brat, don't even think of taking it back. Wei Hao hugged the Mountain Ascension Incantation tightly in his embrace, as though Wang Chong was trying to dig out his heart. Ha ha ha. Wang Chong retracted his right hand and laughed heartily. Seeing Wang Chong laughing, Wei Hao couldn't help but laugh as well. The two brothers seemed to have returned to the harmonious relationship they had when they were young. The misunderstanding caused by Ma Zhou had completely disappeared. Brat, take this Mountain Ascension Incantation as a token of my hard work over the past few days. Don't even mention it in the future. Right, if there's such a good thing in the future, remember to call me along. Dream on. Wang Chong scolded jokingly. He wasn't surprised that Wei Hao would like this manual. That was because this manual was created for someone with mediocre talent like Wei Hao. It was common knowledge that the majority of people in the world weren't geniuses with outstanding talent, but ordinary people. Although most of these people were destined to not have any accomplishments, nothing was absolute. There was always a chance of survival. The mountain ascension incantation belonged to such a chance. This manual didn't have any requirements on talent, but it required 10 times, 100 times the effort. Clumsy birds fly early. If one's talent couldn't compare to others, then put in more effort. This was the concept of the mountain ascension incantation. This cultivation technique basically had no bottlenecks. From the origin energy realm to the true martial realm, then to the profound martial realm, then the imperial martial realm, this cultivation technique could be cultivated endlessly. The only thing one had to put in was more effort 100 times or even 1,000 times. The further one progressed, the more effort one had to put in. For this cultivation technique, hard work was its bottleneck. However, even so, Wang Chong didn't have much of an impression of this cultivation technique. In fact, he almost couldn't remember it at all. The reason was simple. Although this cultivation technique was mystical, it wasn't suitable for Wang Chong. Everyone had their own cultivation technique. This cultivation technique might be powerful for Wei Hao, but it might not necessarily be the same for Wang Chong. In fact, it might even be inferior to ordinary cultivation techniques. Furthermore, this cultivation technique wasn't fully implemented in his previous life. The reason was simple: there was no time. This cultivation technique required too much time. Furthermore, the number of people who could put in so much effort was probably even fewer than those talented geniuses. Keep this matter to yourself. Don't tell anyone else, including your father. Wang Chong said. Don't worry. I know. When I'm strong enough, I'll teach that Weijia a lesson. Wei Hao said ruthlessly. Hearing Wei Hao mention his cousin again, Wang Chong only smiled. However, he had other thoughts in his mind and didn't expose him. Everyone was fated to have a demon star that restrained them. Wei Hao's demon star was his cousin, Weijia. Compared to the younger generation of the Wei clan, Weijia was undoubtedly a genius. Although he was younger than Wei Hao, his cultivation was higher than Wei Hao's. Perhaps he was angry that his father's official rank was lower than Wei Hao's, or perhaps he wanted to vent his father's anger through Wei Hao. Every time he came to the Wei clan, Weijia especially liked to cause trouble for Wei Hao and think of ways to teach him a lesson. This made Wei Hao's father, the Duke of Wei, especially angry. In addition, Wei Hao's aptitude was mediocre, and he didn't inherit the Duke of Wei's merits. Therefore, Wei Hao's situation at home wasn't as easy as it seemed. This was also the reason why Wang Chong gave Wei Hao the mountain ascension incantation. Let's not talk about this. There's something I need to trouble you with. Wang Chong stretched out his right hand and went straight to the point. He opened the lid of the wooden chest in the carriage. More than 17,000 gold taels immediately came into view. Here are 17,000 gold taels. Take it all and help me gather all kinds of food. Cows, sheep, pigs, bananas, water grains, millet, sorghum. As long as it's edible, it'll do. You've sold it? Wei Hao widened his eyes. He had given the 37,000 gold taels previously to the 2 Sindhi monks. For another 10,000 gold taels to appear here, it was clear that he had sold the sword. Of the 35,000 gold taels, this is only half of it. Wang Chong nodded. He didn't hide anything from Wei Hao. Don't worry. It's fine as long as there's gold. Leave this matter to me, Wei Hao said. He wasn't the one who had the final say in the Wei clan. However, as long as there was money, it was purely a business transaction. As long as it could earn money, the Wei clan wouldn't reject it. Also, help me with something. Wang Chong whispered his thoughts to Wei Hao. Wei Hao hurriedly nodded his head. No problem. Leave this matter to me. After everything was settled, there wasn't much else to be said. Wang Chong jumped down from the carriage and left it for Wei Hao to transport the gold. Then he rushed back home. His little sister was currently indulging in pleasure. After receiving a huge sum of several hundred gold taels from Wang Chong, she had become a millionaire. Every day she would follow behind cousin Wang Zhuyan and have a good time. Sometimes she wouldn't even return home. The Wang clan was strict and such a situation was forbidden. However, if it was cousin Wang Zhuyan, as long as she sent a note over, his mother wouldn't pursue the matter. After settling the matters in Sindhu, Wang Chong spent the next few days in peace. He would wake up in the middle of the night to practice his dragon bone art and Herculean fist. Then he would head to the Ghost Tree district during the day, and place down a black stone to play chess with the war god So Young's son. The days were peaceful and orderly. Come. Everyone, let's toast to young Master Su. I, Zhang Wei, will never bow down to anyone except for young Master Su. Young Master Su has always been the person I respect the most. Zhang Wei, I'm different from you. Young Master Su, let me toast to you. You have always been the person I respect the most. In the capital of the Tang dynasty, who doesn't know of young Master Su? Indeed. Given Duke of Su's influence, there is no one in the capital who wouldn't give him some face. Even the Yao clan and Wang clan have to be wary of him. In the Eight Gods Pavilion, a large group of people surrounded Su Bai, fawning on him and fawning on him. Su Bai reclined in his armchair, narrowing his eyes as he raised his wine glass, accepting the compliments from the crowd without any trace of politeness. In the capital of the Tang dynasty, these scions were undoubtedly the most influential scions in the capital. But honestly speaking, Su Bai didn't think much of them. Su Bai knew that they were fawning on him, but there was one thing that they were right about. His father, Duke of Su Fuwei, was definitely one of the most influential figures in the capital of the Tang dynasty. Even the Yao clan and Wang clan couldn't disregard his father's existence. Oh right, young Master Su, why did you suddenly decide to treat everyone today and call everyone over? A scion put down his wine cup and asked curiously. Even though Su Bai Gongzi wasn't a petty person, he wasn't a generous person either. In the Eight Gods Pavilion, it was rare for them to meet him for a meal even once every 3 months. They weren't related to each other, and they weren't close to each other. It was rare for them to meet even once every 3 years. Chapter 72. Humph. Hearing those words, Su Bai harumphed, and his expression suddenly turned cold. In an instant the atmosphere changed. No one could have imagined that Su Bai's expression would change just like the weather in April. Everyone's heart turned cold, and they immediately shut their mouth. Duke of Su was like the sun in the sky. Even though they came from wealthy backgrounds, how could they compare to Su Bai? Now that Su Bai was displeased, no one dared to speak. Humph, to think that all of you would have forgotten about it. Looks like I have to remind all of you. Have you forgotten that we still have 1,000 gold taels with Wang Chong? How can you all forget about such an important matter? Su Bai's face was cold. Everyone immediately came to a realization. They finally understood why Su Bai would treat them at the Eight Gods Pavilion for the first time. Those who weren't close to Su Bai immediately regretted their actions. They shouldn't have come to the Eight Gods Pavilion for Su Bai's sake. Clearly, Su Bai wanted to make use of them to deal with the Wang clan. This was a political battle between the Wang clan, Su clan, and Yao clan. Su Bai didn't care about it. He could play in it, but they couldn't afford to. If they were to get embroiled in a battle between the top clans of the empire, they would be reduced to ashes. They probably wouldn't even know what was going on when a calamity suddenly befell their clan. Young Master Su, my stomach is a little. Let me say this first, it's only right for one to repay one's debt. Back then we borrowed it together at the Eight Gods Pavilion, and today we shall return it together. If anyone dares to refuse, it means that they aren't giving me face. In the future, if any elder, relative, or father were to be demoted, don't say that I didn't warn you. Before those scions could find an excuse to leave, Su Bai had already taken the initiative to beat them into a retreat. His cold gaze swept across the crowd impolitely, and a threatening aura emanated from it. Upon hearing those words, the scions who were about to retreat felt their hearts tremble and they immediately stopped in their tracks. Given Duke of Su's capability, it was entirely possible for him to do such a thing. Young Master Su, there's a matter regarding Wang Chong that I wonder if you know of. There's a swordsmith in the Bluebottle Pavilion who sells swords for 40,000 gold taels. I heard that his name is Wang Chong. In the crowd, a noble child suddenly said hesitantly, 40,000 taels? Su Bai was taken aback. Yes, young Master Su, do you think have you lost your minds? It was just someone with the same name. Do you think that the swordsmith is Wang Chong? How is that possible? Su Bai sneered. Even if he was beaten to death, he would not believe that Wang Chong had this kind of ability. What kind of joke was this? If Wang Chong had this kind of ability, how could he be toyed with by a small hooligan like Ma Zhou? If Wang Chong had such a thing, he would still need to borrow money from them for 40,000 taels of silver. How could these guys have such a ridiculous idea? Hearing Su Bai's words, the crowd also felt that it was ridiculous. Indeed, if Wang Chong was so rich, why would he borrow money from them? Nowadays, who wasn't begging their families for money? Not to mention earning 40,000 taels of gold. There weren't many people who could earn 100 taels of gold. If Wang Chong had such ability, he was truly a god. Right, I suddenly recalled something. I heard that Wang Chong of the Bluebottle Pavilion looks to be 17 or 18, much older than Wang Chong. Young Master Su is right. The two of them must have the same name. Another tall and skinny noble suddenly recalled a detail and said, "Right, I remember it too. That swordsmith is indeed 17 or 18, much older than Wang Chong." Right, that's what I heard from my family as well. Me too. Me too. Upon his reminder, the others also recalled the matter and they began to speak up. At this moment, everyone relaxed. Even the noble scion who brought up the matter previously felt embarrassed. The difference in age was too great. It was clear that they weren't the same person. He was too preoccupied with the name that he forgot about this point. Hearing the words of the crowd, Su Bai harumphed. Initially, he was still feeling uneasy, but after hearing those words, he immediately calmed down. Later on, everyone will bring a debt receipt. All of us will head to the Wang clan together to claim back the money that Wang Chong owes us. It is only right for one to repay a debt. If anything happens, I, Su Bai, will shoulder it. In the future, we will enjoy glory and riches together. I, Su Bai, will guarantee that all of you will be worry-free. Su Bai patted his chest and sneered coldly. Boom! This time, the crowd cheered in agreement. Looking at the Eight Gods Pavilion, Su Bai smiled gleefully. Write a letter regarding the matter here and send it to the Yao residence. You must pass it to Yao Gongzi. Su Bai beckoned Gao Fei over and whispered into his ears. Yes, Gongzi. Gao Fei knelt on the floor and after hearing Su Bai's words, he immediately turned around and left. Seeing Gao Fei leave, the corners of Su Bai's lips curled up. He heard that Yao Feng was grounded and the entire Yao clan was in seclusion. At this moment, this was the best gift he could give him. He wondered what expression the Wang clan would have if they knew that Wang Chong owed them such a huge sum of money. At this point, Su Bai couldn't help but smile. A good show was about to begin. Who? In the courtyard, Wang Chong exhaled deeply and slowly retracted his cultivation. A ball of warm energy flowed slowly from his bones. After a few days of cultivation, Wang Chong could feel his strength increasing significantly. His dragon bone art had also improved and his root bone was slowly advancing from Panther Bone Tier 1 to Panther Bone Tier 2. Even though it didn't seem like much of a change to Wang Chong, this meant that he would be able to practice more formidable martial arts. In a few more days it should be enough, Wang Chong thought. Currently, he was focusing on his martial arts and he wasn't just cultivating at night. He had extended his cultivation time in the day as well. As a result, his cultivation had improved significantly. After finishing his cultivation, Wang Chong bade farewell to his mother and left the house as per usual. However, this time, Wang Chong felt that something was different. Wang Chong is here, Wang Chong is here. Suddenly, a loud shout sounded. Before Wang Chong could react, he saw a figure leaping down from a tree in the distance. Then, a commotion broke out on the seemingly ordinary street. From all directions, carriages appeared out of nowhere and charged in the direction of the Wang residence. Stop him, don't let him get away. Wang Chong, where do you think you're going? Wang Chong, it's only right for one to repay a debt. Do you think that you can get away with it? A commotion broke out on the street. Initially, Wang Chong looked as though he was facing a formidable foe. However, upon hearing the last sentence, he suddenly burst into laughter. He had already understood what was going on. Gongzi, what's going on? Let's call for reinforcements. Shen Hai and Meng Long immediately appeared by Wang Chong's side. They stared at the raging carriages as though they were facing a formidable foe. There's no need for that. I can handle it myself. Wang Chong waved his hands casually. Walala. While they were speaking, the doors of the carriage opened and a large group of people leaped down from it. They swarmed over from all directions, blocking Wang Chong's path. Wang Gongzi, a month has passed. You can't have forgotten about the debt you owe us, right? In the distance, a cold voice came from a large blue carriage. Subai, hey you bastard, I knew that you were the one behind this. Wang Chong turned around and sneered coldly as he stared at the green carriage. For Subai to gather so many people here, it was clear that he was here to cause trouble. Why would Wang Chong need to be polite to him? Heh, Wang Gongzi, you can't say such words. How can you say that I'm the one who's causing trouble? Pung. The doors of the green carriage opened and Subai, dressed in a green robe embroidered with cloud patterns and a violet gold crown on his head, stepped out of the carriage and landed on the streets. Right, you should know that I'm here to collect my debt. However, I have already recorded this note in the Court of Judicial Review. I wonder if you know about it? Subai took out a piece of paper from his green sleeve and held it in his hand with a gleeful smile. Before his voice faded away, the door of the green carriage opened behind him, and two green figures walked out from the left and right sides of the carriage. Bastard! Upon seeing the two of them, Wang Chong's face immediately warped. Wang Chong knew that it was only a matter of time before Subai used this note to make a fuss. Wang Chong wasn't afraid of money, but Wang Chong didn't expect that Subai would call the officials of the Court of Judicial Review over. These two serious and old-fashioned officials were none other than the temple officials of the Supreme Court. Furthermore, Subai had chosen the two most inflexible, strict, and unlikable among the officials of the Court of Judicial Review. These two would only appear when others went back on their word. The moment they appeared, it wouldn't be a good thing. Clearly, Subai didn't invite them here to collect his debt. Instead, he wanted to blow the matter up. Seeing the awful expression on Wang Chong's face, Subai chuckled gleefully. If Wang Chong thought that the Eight Gods Pavilion would only ask for his debt when it was due, he would be underestimating him. How could the son of the Duke of Su residence be so useless? This time, he had specially invited the two most impartial officials of the Court of Judicial Review over. Right now, he was going to teach Wang Chong a lesson in politics. What was the meaning of means? Wang Gongzi, these notes were written by you, right? Su Gongzi said that you owe them 1,700 gold taels. Is that true? The official on Subai's left asked. This was a stern-looking old man. He wasn't tall and his hair was white. His face was as rigid as a rock, and when he spoke, other than the movement of his wrinkled lips, his entire body didn't move at all. It was as though he was a dried corpse, and just the sight of him was frightening. You should know the laws of the royal court. Even if you are the grandson of Duke Jiu, the same goes for the emperor. The other old man said impassively. He was also as thin as a dried corpse. The moment those words were spoken, countless eyes turned to look at Wang Chong, who was standing at the entrance of the Wang family residence, as though they were waiting for a good show to unfold. Lords, this doesn't seem to be in line with the rules? Wang Chong ignored Subai. Instead, he turned to the two officials of the Court of Judicial Review. The Court of Judicial Review will only appear when the other party is unable to fulfill the contract. Since the contract hasn't been fulfilled yet, aren't the two of you a little too early? Chapter 73. Even though it's against the rules, Subai's words aren't without reason. 1,700 gold taels isn't a small matter. Given your capabilities, there's a high chance that you won't be able to repay it. As long as the Court of Judicial Review feels that there's a high chance that you're going against the contract, they can interfere. This isn't unprecedented. The lips of the two corpse-like officials of the Court of Judicial Review trembled. However, don't worry. As long as you fulfill the contract with Su Gongzi, the Court of Judicial Review won't be a threat to you. The reason why the Tang dynasty was able to prosper was due to its honesty and trustworthiness. It was precisely because of this that society was able to flourish. It was precisely because of this that the Tang dynasty was able to attract guests from all over the world. Merchants from Karakspazinu, Abbasid Caliphate, Silla and Turkic Khaganate came to visit. Due to this, The Court of Judicial Review was extremely strict with those who went against the contract. Even though the two of them were invited by Su Bai, as long as Wang Chong fulfilled the contract, they would leave immediately. Wang Chong, why are you so afraid? Are you intending to go against the contract? The Eight Gods Pavilion is written in black and white. I'm afraid that you won't be able to escape from it, right? Su Bai stepped forward and sneered coldly. Wang Chong thought that he was here to beg for money, but how could that be? Today he was determined to embarrass the Wang clan. Su Bai, I'll give you another chance. You better think it through. Business is business. Are you sure that you want to help the Yao clan to deal with our Wang clan? Wang Chong said coldly. Wang Chong knew that Su Bai and Yao Feng were close, but it was one thing for them to go up to the stage personally. That was a different matter altogether. Su Bai was clearly intending to blow the matter up. This was no longer the matter of the two of them having a grudge in the Eight Gods Pavilion. Su Bai sneered coldly. He couldn't be bothered to say anything else. With a single glance, the crowd by his side immediately shouted, Wang Chong, return the money! Return the money! Return the money! The voices grew louder and louder. Seeing the situation, Wang Chong sneered coldly. If he really took the money to indulge in debauchery, today's matter would be really difficult. However, Su Bai probably wouldn't have guessed that he had used their money to buy the Hyderabad ores. The current Wang Chong was truly rich and overbearing. 1,700 taels of gold, plus the interest of 1,000 taels of gold, was nothing to him right now. Shanhai, come here. Wang Chong beckoned Shanhai over. There's a box under my bed. Bring that box over here. There were 5,000 taels of gold in the chest. Uncle had specially sent it over after he found out that Wang Chong had given all the money to Wei Hao. If it was packed in a wooden box, no one would know. If Su Bai thought that 2,700 gold taels would be able to stop him, he was truly underestimating him. Yes. Shall I go now? Shanhai nodded and left. Before he left, he glanced at Su Bai and sneered disdainfully. Even though there was a huge commotion outside, in Shanhai's eyes it was just a clown. After spending time with young Master Chong, Shanhai and Menglong had learned many of his secrets. On Wang Chong's carriage, he had seen gold taels worth more than 10,000 taels a few times. For Su Bai to cause trouble at the Wang family for a few thousand gold taels was nothing more than a small squabble. Young Master Chong, there's no need to stand on ceremony with these people, Shanhai said. Wang Chong chuckled and waved his hands. Shanhai immediately understood and left. What's going on? Who is that? A few breaths after Shanhai left, a doubtful voice sounded from behind. Before the voice could finish, a beautiful lady dressed in green walked out from the door with a doubtful expression. Behind her was a group of old nannies and maids. Mother! Upon seeing the figure, Wang Chong's face changed. He had tried his best to minimize the impact of this matter, but his mother was still alarmed. Madame Wang was resting in the residence when she heard a huge commotion. Not knowing what was going on, she came out to take a look. Su Gongzi. Upon seeing Su Bai in the crowd, Madame Wang was taken aback. She recognized Su Bai. Back then, she had seen Madame Su bringing Su Bai along in the palace. Why are you here? Madame Wang was astonished. Madame Wang, you came at the right time. Your son owes us 1,700 gold taels. This is written in black and white. We aren't trying to frame you. Su Bai shook the note in his hand and smiled sinisterly. Right, by the way, this is a 2% interest. What? Upon hearing Su Bai's words, Madame Wang's vision darkened. As though she was struck by lightning, her body swayed and she nearly fell to the ground. Madame Wang didn't expect that Wang Chong would owe someone 1,000 gold taels behind her back. Furthermore, it was a 2% interest. To Madame Wang, this was something she didn't even dare to imagine. The Wang family couldn't bear such a huge debt. Upon seeing this sight, Su Bai chuckled gleefully. What he had been anticipating had finally happened. He was certain that the Wang clan didn't know that Wang Chong had borrowed money from the Eight Gods Pavilion. He had gathered so many people, waving flags and shouting battle cries precisely because he wanted to blow this matter up, to let the Wang family, to let everyone know of this matter. The Wang clan was a huge clan and their monthly expenses weren't small at all. Wang Yan's stipend was only sufficient to provide for this large group of guards, nannies and maids. He wanted to see if he had 100 gold taels left in his savings every month. 1,000 gold taels including the interest would be close to 3,000 gold taels. Let's see how the Wang clan is going to repay such a huge sum. This is bad. Seeing his mother looking at him, Wang Chong's heart sank. He had been trying to resolve this matter without alarming his mother, but to think that it would still happen. Chong'er, is what Su Gongzi said true? Madame Wang clenched her teeth and her face steeled. From the looks of it, Wang Chong didn't just owe Su Bai money. With a single glance, it was hard to tell how many scions of prestigious clans had gathered here and how much money he owed. This was simply audacious. It was just a moment ago that she had a good impression of Wang Chong, but to think that he would revert back to his old ways. Mother, listen to me. This matter isn't as you think it to be. Wang Chong braced himself and said, you just have to tell me whether what Su Gongzi said is true or not. Madame Wang stared at Wang Chong and said sternly, yes. Wang Chong lowered his head and said, You. Madame Wang's body trembled in anger. She pointed a finger at Wang Chong, but she couldn't say a single word. Madame, calm down. Madame, calm down. Seeing that Madame was infuriated, the group of nannies and maids hurried forward to support her, massaging her and soothing her chest. Then they hurriedly persuaded Wang Chong, young master, you shouldn't speak anymore. Wang Chong also cursed inwardly. He hadn't told his mother about the matter regarding the 8 Gods Pavilion in Hyderabad. The reason was simple. Wang Chong didn't want his mother to worry too much. If he were to know too many things, his mother would surely overthink things. Furthermore, he had already grown up, and there were some matters that he could resolve on his own. At the same time, this would lessen the pressure on his mother. Furthermore, Wang Chong didn't intend to hide the matter regarding the 8 Gods Pavilion and Hyderabad from his mother forever. Just that, it seemed like he had chosen the worst timing to do so. Not too far away, Su Bai sneered coldly. Wasn't this scene exactly what he had hoped for? Wang Chong glared at him before turning around to look at his mother. Even though the matter regarding the 8 Gods Pavilion had been exposed, Wang Chong didn't panic in the slightest. Mother, this matter isn't as you think it to be. Even though 1,700 gold taels isn't a small sum, it isn't a problem at all. I can resolve it. Stop bragging. How are you going to resolve it? The crowd burst into laughter. Their family was considered wealthy, but their monthly allowance was at most a few taels of gold. At most it was a dozen or 20 taels of gold. Even so, they didn't dare to borrow so much money casually like Wang Chong. The Wang clan didn't do business, so they were even worse off than them. It would be a miracle if Wang Chong could afford it. Wang Chong couldn't be bothered with them at all. 1,700 gold taels wasn't a problem to him at all. Mother, listen to me. I didn't squander this sum of money. I used it to start a business. Wang Chong said. Start a business? What business? Madame Wang finally caught her breath. Upon hearing those words, she immediately asked, Ha ha ha, even at this moment, Wang Chong, are you still going to lie to your mother? Su Bai burst into laughter. He had heard Wang Chong's words clearly. What business? In his view, it was complete nonsense. What lie? When has our young master ever lied? Isn't it just 1,000 gold taels? Take it. At this moment, a loud voice sounded from within the gates. Deep disdain could be heard in the voice. Pung! Before the figure could be seen, a black shadow flew out. Su Bai dodged to the side, dodging the attack in an instant. Turning his body, he saw the object falling to the ground. Ding ding, it was a pure gold ingot. In an instant, Su Bai's face warped. Ha ha ha. Shanhai, you came at the right time. Seeing Shanhai walking over, Wang Chong's eyebrows relaxed and he laughed heartily. Facts speak louder than words. This kind of thing could not be explained clearly. Only real money was the most convincing. Young master, to deal with these fellows, you should smash their faces with gold. Why are you wasting your breath on them? You only earn a few taels of gold a month. How can you be compared to our young master? Shanhai looked at the crowd outside disdainfully. Carrying a wooden chest in his hands, the several hundred gene items seemed as light as a feather in his hands. You are just a lackey, stop boasting. How many taels of gold do you want? Take it out. The arrogant scions in the surroundings immediately felt indignant. Subai scolded them, but they didn't dare to retaliate. Wang Chong wasn't someone they could afford to offend, but what was a mere lackey to dare to look at them with such disdain? The pampered scions here were the first to lose their temper. Humph! Shanhai harumphed in disdain. Then he did a single thing. Pung! His hands loosened, and the wooden chest in his hands was smashed to the ground. The wooden frame of the chest was smashed into smithereens, and from the tightly sealed chest, a huge pile of golden objects gushed out. It was all gold. Shua! In an instant everyone's breathing stopped. Even Madame Wang Zhaoshuhua was stunned. Standing up from the maid's embrace, she stared at the pile of gold on the ground, speechless. In front of the Wang family residence, time seemed to have stopped. Impossible! Chapter 74. The Wang clan was extremely strict, and Wang Chong's monthly allowance was only a few silver taels. Based on Subai's calculations, it was impossible for Wang Chong to take out so much gold. But now there was more than 1,000 gold taels here. Subai was dumbfounded. Wang Chong, Shanhai, and Menglong could clearly sense the change in the atmosphere, and the trio chuckled. Gongzi, there's no need to stand on ceremony with these people. Just do what you should do. Shanhai said. That's right, this is how you should deal with such despicable people. Menglong chimed in by the side. When it came to Wang Chong, the two of them had undergone a massive change. When Wang Chong, Ma Zhou, and the others messed around outside, causing trouble for the clan, the two of them had always disliked it. Most of the time, the two of them would criticize Wang Chong in their hearts. But after following Wang Chong for a period of time, their view of Wang Chong had undergone an earth-shattering change. The two of them had personally witnessed Wang Chong doing many inconceivable things. In their eyes, Wang Chong was the most outstanding and promising young master of the Wang clan. They couldn't wait to protect him. If anyone were to speak ill of Wang Chong now, that person would be their enemy. The two of them would be the first to get angry with him. How could Shanhai tolerate Su by slandering his Gongzi? Well done. Inwardly, Wang Chong gave a thumbs up in praise. Facts speak louder than words. No matter how much Wang Chong said, it wasn't as effective as Shanhai smashing a chest of gold on the ground. Shanhai's smash was truly ingenious. It was even more effective than if Wang Chong had done it himself. The entrance of the Wang family residence was silent. Everyone was stunned by the 5,000 gold taels that Wang Chong smashed on the ground. Even Wang Chong's mother Zhao Shuhua was stunned speechless. Wang Chong had taken 2 gold taels worth several tens of thousands of gold taels in total. But the first time, the gold didn't enter his house. Instead, it took a detour around the capital and ended up in the bags of Ablanadin and Arloja. The second time she gave half to Wei Hao and the other half to Uncle. This was the first time Wang Chong had brought gold home, and it was sealed in a box. Therefore, even Madame Wang did not know about it. So much gold, even to the Wang family, was an unimaginably large sum of money. Mrs. Wang wanted to ask Wang Chong where he got so much money, but she held it back. It wasn't the right time to ask about this. Where did you get so much money? A foppish young master muttered to himself as he stared at the gold that had leaked out of the chest on the ground. He was deeply shocked. In the 8 Gods Pavilion, they could be considered as wealthy individuals. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the money to lend to Wang Chong. But compared to Wang Chong, he was still far behind. There was at least 4,000 to 5,000 gold taels in the chest. To them, it was an unimaginable amount. In an instant, the crowd suddenly felt the huge gap between them and Wang Chong. For some reason, a huge ravine had appeared between them and Wang Chong. They were on this side of the ravine, but on the other side, Wang Chong had already surpassed their level. He had become an existence that they couldn't even look up to. Wang Chong was still the same Wang Chong. But in the eyes of the crowd, there was something intimidating about him. There's no need for you to bother about that. Wang Chong swept his gaze across the crowd and sneered coldly. Isn't it just 1,700 gold taels? You can claim it with the note. Let me tell you something, I was intending to give each of you an extra 100 gold taels, but since you helped Subai to deal with me, there's no need for that anymore. This reward can only be left for those who didn't come today. 100 gold taels. I already said that I shouldn't have come. Young Master Chong, this has nothing to do with me. I didn't even shout a single word. I didn't either. Young Master Chong, I'm just passing by. Upon hearing that 100 gold taels were gone just like that, the crowd immediately wailed in agony. Those of lower standing and birth couldn't afford to offend Su Bai, and they couldn't afford to offend the Duke of Su who stood behind him. Even so, Duke of Su hadn't reached the level where he wielded absolute power in the Tang dynasty. Naturally, there were those who didn't give in to Su Bai. They had intended to do him a favor, but how could they accept losing 100 gold taels? That was equivalent to more than a year's worth of their monthly allowance. This wasn't a small sum. Even if they took the life of debauchery and Hu Shua Hai, they would be able to last for a long time. Due to Su Bai's failure, they had lost so much gold taels. Their intestines were green with regret. Young master is wise. Shun Hai and Meng Long didn't say anything, but they were grinning from ear to ear. This is what you call formidable. Without even having to fork out a single cent, he managed to tear Su Bai apart with just a few words. Some of the anxious ones had already started cursing at Su Bai. I didn't realize that young master is actually so formidable. The two of them couldn't help but click their tongues. If Wang Chong were to give them the gold taels just like that, these fellows wouldn't be grateful. But to suddenly tell them that he was prepared to give them as much as he wanted, but because they rebelled with Su Bai, everything was cancelled. It wasn't hard to imagine the pain they were feeling right now. Standing beside Wang Chong, Shun Hai and Meng Long could see the pain written on the faces of those profligate scions, and the dissatisfaction they had toward Su Bai was even greater. They didn't dare to get angry when they were alone, but it was a different story when there was a group of them. Bastard! Don't listen to his nonsense. Su Bai didn't expect Wang Chong to have such a move up his sleeves. In an instant he felt both anxious and furious. It wasn't easy for him to gather so many scions and nobles together, and yet it was about to be resolved by Wang Chong. How could Su Bai be willing to accept this? Wait a moment. Glancing at the wooden chest that Wang Chong had smashed on the ground, a thought flashed through Su Bai's mind. He stepped forward, pointed at the gold taels and bellowed, Wang Chong, your Wang clan has never been involved in business. With just you, Wang Chong, how can you possibly get so much gold? Humph. I'm suspecting that your Wang clan has accepted bribes from others. Su Bai stared at Wang Chong with a menacing gaze, as though he was trying to peer into the depths of the latter's heart. He had almost been thrown into disarray by Wang Chong's counterattack. However, Su Bai finally understood the situation. The Wang clan had always been struggling to make ends meet, so how could they possibly have so much gold? Su Bai didn't believe that the Wang clan would be able to save so much money. There must be a problem here. Censor Fu. It is your duty to supervise the officials and enforce discipline. To think that the Wang clan has always been upright, yet they have secretly embezzled so much gold. Can you just ignore this matter? Su Bai abruptly turned around to look at the other carriage behind him. Jia, the carriage door opened, and a purple-robed white-haired elder walked out with a dark expression. This elder had been eavesdropping in the carriage for a long time, and upon hearing Su Bai's call, he walked out. Wang Chong didn't recognize this elder, but upon seeing the fish talisman on the other party's waist, his face immediately warped in shock. This was an imperial censor of the Tang dynasty, and a vice minister of the imperial censor at that. In order to deal with him, Su Bai not only summoned the vice minister of the Court of Judicial Review, he even summoned an imperial censor of the Tang dynasty. Su Bai. Wang Chong glared at Su Bai with an incomparably dark expression. If he summoned the vice minister of the Court of Judicial Review, it was likely that he, Wang Chong, would be the only one locked up in the prison of the Court of Judicial Review. However, Su Bai's target wasn't just him, but the imperial censors of the royal court. Instead, it was the entire Wang clan. This was a grave offense against the Wang clan, leaving no room for Wang Chong to salvage the situation. Furthermore, for an imperial censor of the royal court to be hiding in a carriage instead of discussing the affairs of the country in the royal court, listening to the arguments of his children, it was impossible for Wang Chong to believe that Su Bai hadn't been plotting this for a long time. Su Bai, you asked for it. A vicious glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes. Madam Wang Gongzi, I saw everything in the carriage. I believe you have heard Su Gongzi's words as well. The Wang clan isn't a wealthy clan, and Duke Zhou's incorruptibility has always been respected by the entire royal court. I don't want to doubt the Wang clan, but this chest of gold isn't something that the Wang clan can accumulate through their salary. As an imperial censor, I am responsible for supervising the officials and upholding discipline. I will have to report this matter to the nobles of the royal court and His Majesty. Censor Fu spoke very slowly, almost spitting out each word one at a time. But every single word he spat out seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 caddies. Around the Wang clan gate, the anger of the crowd was originally focused on Su Bai. But after this Censor Fu appeared, all of them fell silent, not daring to utter a single word. Their eyes were filled with fear. In the Tang dynasty, there was no one more fearsome than the imperial censors. If a single wrong word were to fall into the ears of the imperial censors, they could be impeached. In the Tang dynasty, even the most mischievous scion knew that in the Tang dynasty, one could offend anyone but the imperial censors. The area within 10 kilometers of any imperial censor was a forbidden zone, and no scion would dare to mess around them lest they brought trouble to their family. No one could have imagined that Su Bai would hide a censor in the carriage and accompany them to the Wang family residence. Su Bai, that bastard, is he mad? To bring the imperial censor here. Doesn't he know that this is a huge taboo? Everyone was filled with fear and hatred. It was fine for Su Bai to deal with Wang Chong, but for him to bring the imperial censor here, he was throwing everyone into the fire. In order to deal with the Wang clan and side with the Yao clan and King Qi, he was willing to go to any lengths. Everyone wanted nothing more than to distance themselves from Su Bai and that Censor Fu, but no one dared to make a move at this moment. If they were to be targeted by the imperial censor, they would be in deep trouble. Su Bai could clearly sense the change in the atmosphere, but he paid it no heed. Instead, he was gleeful, and his eyes were fixed on Wang Chong alone. Wang Chong, do you think that this is all I'm capable of? Since I'm going to use your head to offer to the Yao clan, do you think that I would come without any preparations? Su Bai sneered coldly. Before coming, he had already made ample preparations. If Wang Chong was unable to repay the 1,700 gold taels, the 2 officials of the Court of Judicial Review would be his gift to the Wang clan. With them, he would be able to blow the matter up. And if something were to happen, Wang Chong would be able to repay the debt. Even though he didn't believe that such a thing would happen, the imperial censor in the other carriage would be of use as well. No matter what, the Wang clan would be doomed. Madame Wang grabbed Wang Chong's hand tightly, and her face was ghastly pale. It wasn't a small matter for a censor to appear at the entrance of the Wang clan. The Wang clan would probably be criticized in the royal court tomorrow. Madame Wang was an opinionated person, but those were just family matters. Chapter 75. Mother, don't worry. I'll deal with this matter. Wang Chong grasped his mother's hands tightly. What Censor Fu? Others might be afraid of him, but he was fearful. After experiencing so many storms, how could he be afraid of a censor's impeachment? Wang Chong knew a little about this Fu He. He didn't get along with big uncle Wang Zhenjing, and his grandfather Duke Zhou was highly respected in the Tang dynasty. However, Fu He seemed to dislike it and often tried to find fault with him. On top of that, of all the censors, he was the closest to Duke of Su. Otherwise, Su Bai wouldn't have been so bold as to invite him over. Censor Fu, you sure have nothing better to do. Censors supervise the officials and maintain order. When did it become a business to supervise ordinary people? Our Wang clan's salary isn't enough to accumulate a few thousand gold taels. But even if the Wang clan can't I? Wang Chong knew of his background, so he didn't bother to be polite with him. Hearing Wang Chong's words, everyone was shocked. Before the censor, everyone had to tread carefully. If they could avoid speaking, they would do so. The more they spoke, the more mistakes they would make, and the less they spoke, the less mistakes they would make. Yet, Wang Chong actually dared to talk back to the censor. Gongzi, don't speak too much. Censors aren't joking. Shen Hai and Meng Long lowered their heads and tugged on Wang Chong's sleeves. The 2 of them were uncouth men in the military, but after living in the capital for a few years, they understood that there were some people they couldn't afford to offend. Wang Gongzi, you're saying that you earned all this money? Censor Fu's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, he assessed Wang Chong seriously. That's right. Wang Chong replied without any hesitation. It seemed like Su Bai was really looking at the wrong place to try and grasp his confidence through Censor Fu. Through the Hyderabad or Wang Chong slowly forged swords and sabers to earn money. These were all well documented, and even if the censor were to investigate him, he wouldn't be able to do anything. Haha, what a joke. Wang Chong, you think you can do that? Before Censor Fu could speak, Su Bai burst into laughter. He did not believe that Wang Chong had such an ability. Such a ridiculous excuse was simply treating others as fools. If he, Wang Chong, was so capable, the Wang clan would have been rich and powerful long ago. How could they still talk about being honest? What was incorruptible? Only those who have no money are incorruptible. In front of the censor, Wang Chong dared to spout nonsense. Wang Gongzi, it's best if you speak the truth. This is no small matter. Censor Fu also spoke slowly, his voice revealing a stern tone. Wang Chong actually dared to spout nonsense in front of him, which made him very uncomfortable. This was a challenge to the authority of the imperial censors. Humph, believe it or not, it's up to you. I said I earned it, so I earned it. Do I still need to lie? Although the power of the imperial censor was great, it did not seem to be to this extent. Do I report to you how I earn money? Wang Chong said coldly. Impudent. Hearing Wang Chong's words, Fu He flew into a rage. Madam Wang, how did you bring up your child? The censor represents the emperor. There is a problem with the Wang clan, and the source of their wealth is unknown. Are you saying that we can't even investigate it? Is the Wang clan so prestigious that they dare to look down on the emperor? Fu He glared at Madame Wang Zhaoshuhua with an incomparably cold gaze. Hearing Censor Fu's words, Madame Wang's face paled. Looking down on the emperor wasn't a small crime. Chonger, don't speak anymore. Madame Wang hurriedly pulled Wang Chong's hands. Censor Fu. Wang Chong flew into a rage. Just as he was about to reveal the matter of the Bluebottle Pavilion, a loud voice suddenly sounded. Didn't Wang Gongzi say it already? I will be the first to object to anyone who dares to say that Wang Gongzi is lying. Hong Long Long, the earth trembled. Before anyone could react to what was going on, at the end of the long street in the distance, smoke and dust billowed. Carriage after carriage rushed in the direction of the Wang family residence. Imperial Army. Seeing the insignia on the carriages, the faces of the scions present paled. The insignia on the luxurious carriages clearly indicated that they belonged to the Imperial Army. More importantly, why would the Imperial Army be here? What were they doing here? Move aside, move aside, move aside. Little brats, scram to the side. Move aside, move aside, move aside. To dare to block the carriage of the Imperial Army. Are your eyes growing on the top of your head? The Imperial Army is here to deal with matters of the Imperial Army. Those insignificant people in front, move aside. A series of domineering and barbaric shouts came from the carriage. All of the scions present came from extraordinary backgrounds, and they were either wealthy or respectable. However, this identity was completely useless in front of the Imperial Army. Move aside, move aside, move aside. Hurry up and drive the carriage away. These bastards are completely unreasonable. Seeing the group of Imperial Army rushing forward aggressively without any signs of stopping, the faces of the scions changed. They hurriedly urged their coachman to drive the carriage away. Even Censor Fu He's face changed upon seeing the Imperial Army, and he hurriedly stood to the side. Civil officials and military officials were two different systems. While it wasn't to say that there was no communication between them, the effectiveness of the two systems was greatly reduced. He could argue for what was right, impeach a prime minister in the royal court, and even reprimand the emperor, but he was helpless against the Imperial Army, who represented the emperor's guards. Hong Long Long. The carriages of the Imperial Army charged into the encirclement formed by the scions as though there was no one around. The scions hurriedly dodged as though they were avoiding the plague. Look! Suddenly someone noticed something. The others also noticed it. Imperial Army. These people are actually the leaders of the Imperial Army. Seeing the leopard, dragon, tiger and Qilin carvings on the carriages, the scions were shocked. Those who had already retreated 3 to 4 zhang back retreated even further. They had some understanding of the imperial army. The bronze carvings on the carriage were in the shape of a leopard, a tiger, a dragon, and a qilin. Not everyone could use them. Those carvings represented the leaders of the imperial army, and those of high standing at that. Why are these fellows here? Those who knew the background of the imperial army were shocked. These imperial army leaders were like scorpions and tigers. Just a few of them were like little chicks in their hands. They weren't even enough to play with. It's you. Censor Fu. He had retreated to the side. But when he saw the leaders of the imperial army, he stopped. Not only did he not retreat, he even walked forward. What are you imperial army members doing here instead of guarding the emperor in the royal palace? Be careful, I might report you for negligence. Lord Censor, the imperial army is responsible for guarding the emperor, but there's no rule that says that we can't leave the royal palace, right? Besides, do we have to report to you every time we buy a few swords? These imperial army leaders all had thick beards, thick brows, and thick lips. With a single look, it was clear that they were arrogant, domineering, and unreasonable people. Buy swords? Getting Su Bai's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? What swords? Censor Fu asked with a dark expression. I can't be bothered to explain it to you. Others might fear censors but not the imperial army. The imperial army was the emperor's guard, and they represented the emperor. The only ones who could punish them were their superiors and the emperor. However, censors weren't in this category. Gongzi, there's no need to lower yourself to their level. I am the general of the Soaring Serpent Army. Zhang Song pays respect to Gongzi. Isn't it just a few thousand gold taels? How dare they accuse Gongzi for such a small sum of money? I have 50,000 gold taels in my carriage. Gongzi, feel free to take it. They must be blind to not recognize the #1 swordsmith in the world. Gongzi, your swords are truly beautiful. I beseech Gongzi to forge one for me as well. I'll pay any price. Bastard. I haven't even said anything yet. Gongzi, please forge one for me as well. Gongzi, I trust in your abilities. I'm confident in your swords. Just that, the gems on the swords aren't all that beautiful. No, I brought it myself. Gongzi, take a look and use these gems. The rest are all yours. I only have one request, and that is for you to forge a more beautiful sword for me. So many requests. Gongzi, I'm different from them. Whatever you forge, I want it. Help me forge a sword as well. Under the dumbfounded gazes of the crowd, those arrogant and domineering imperial army officers turned around and bowed to Wang Chong, making it so that no one dared to look them in the eye. Their fawning manner left one unable to believe that they were the arrogant leaders of the imperial army who barged into the hall earlier on. What is going on? The crowd was dumbfounded, unable to react to the situation. When did Wang Chong possess such magical powers to make these imperial army soldiers so humble? Madame Wang was also dumbfounded. The old nannies, maids, and servants stared at one another before turning their gazes to Wang Chong. The sight before them was simply too inconceivable. Only Wang Chong could explain it. Wang Chong didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. He couldn't understand what was going on either. This group of imperial army soldiers came too suddenly, leaving him completely clueless. He could only vaguely guess that it had something to do with the Wuxia steel sword that he had forged. However, he couldn't understand why they would suddenly appear at this moment. Wait a moment. Are you sure you aren't mistaken? Is the person you're looking for really Wang Chong? A voice suddenly sounded by the side. Su Bai walked out from the crowd. His expression was terrifyingly calm. He didn't believe that Wang Chong was the #1 swordsmith. Upon seeing these people, his first thought was that they had come to the wrong place or the wrong person. Who are you? Why are you making a ruckus here? Are you blind? You don't even recognize the #1 swordsmith in the world. We don't dare to call Gongzi by his name, but this lad dares to do so. Get out of here and stand over there. Master, don't be angry. This lad isn't worthy of your anger. Why don't you teach him a lesson for you? Chapter 76. Ever since he was young, Su Bai had always gotten whatever he wanted. Furthermore, he was an intelligent person, so he had never suffered such humiliation before. However, the imperial army was filled with boorish men, and they relied on their strength to speak. Su Bai's name was completely useless against them. Wang Chong, I'll return the humiliation I suffered today to you sooner or later. Su Bai wasn't able to deal with these powerful imperial army leaders. In fact, he didn't even know their names, so he vented his anger on Wang Chong. Wang Chong didn't know what Su Bai was thinking, and he couldn't be bothered with him either. Looking at Su Bai's flushed face, he found it rather amusing. However, compared to that, the sudden appearance of the imperial army was what Wang Chong was more concerned about. Until now, Wang Chong still had no idea why so many imperial army members would rush to his doorstep. Furthermore, with so many people begging for help, Wang Chong had to deal with them. Everyone. As for the swords, we'll talk about it once we're inside, Wang Chong said. The crowd outside was getting bigger, and this wasn't a good place to talk. Boom! Hearing Wang Chong's words, the imperial army members immediately responded with smiles. We'll listen to Gongzi. We'll do as Gongzi says. If anyone dares to cause trouble, don't blame me for getting nasty. Gongzi, feel free to instruct us. We'll listen to you. Gongzi, you must agree to forge swords for us. If I can't buy the Wuxia steel sword, I'll die. Hearing the fawning voices of the crowd, Su Bai's face turned green and red, and his heart was filled with hatred. The imperial army members in the royal court had always been arrogant, and they refused to submit to anyone. When had he ever seen them act so submissive and fawning? He didn't know what kind of sorcery Wang Chong possessed to make these imperial army leaders behave in such a manner. Su Bai was still fine, but the other scions present were already dumbfounded. This Wang Chong is way too formidable. To think that even the commanders of the imperial army would fawn over him. To think that we were still thinking of helping Su Bai deal with him. Even 10 Su Bais wouldn't be a match for him. This is like hitting a rock with an egg. The scions looked at Wang Chong, who was surrounded by the imperial army, in envy. They wondered when they would be able to be as awe-inspiring as Wang Chong, and receive the compliments of so many imperial army soldiers. But apart from envy, he also felt a deep reverence in his heart. The current Wang Chong had far surpassed their level, and had become an existence that they could only look up to. Menglong, go and settle it. Bring this chest of gold with you and get them to bring a slip of paper over to exchange for the silver we borrowed from the 8 Gods Pavilion. Ignoring the crowd outside, Wang Chong instructed Menglong, yes, young master. Menglong replied. He was a man of his word. Although these dignitaries did not come with good intentions, they were two different things. He liked the young master's character very much. Come over here. Our young master is magnanimous and won't fuss over your actions. Come over here and cash in your silver. Menglong began to call the scions over. Upon hearing that they could receive money, the crowd cheered and rushed over. Their impression of Wang Chong immediately grew. This lord, can you still honor the 100 gold taels each? A scion asked carefully. Scram! Menglong berated. The crowd burst into laughter, and their relationship with the Wang clan improved significantly. Upon seeing this sight, Wang Chong smiled. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, his gaze suddenly fell on a figure outside. His eyes turned cold and he bellowed, Su Bai, where are you going? His voice sounded like rumbling thunder, echoing through the streets in front of the Wang family residence. Dozens of steps away, Su Bai's body trembled and his footsteps came to an abrupt halt. He stopped a few steps away from the green carriage. At the same time, countless gazes turned to look at this scion of the Duke of Su. The originally noisy street became dead silent in an instant, and the atmosphere suddenly became tense again. Wang Chong, what do you want? Su Bai slowly turned around. Looking at Wang Chong on the stairs, his face alternated between green and white. The situation had changed and he was in an extremely disadvantageous position. He intended to sneak into the carriage and leave this place, but he didn't expect to be discovered by Wang Chong. Since you're already here, you can't possibly think that you can leave so easily, right? Wang Chong flung his sleeves and sneered coldly. This Su Bai came here with the backing of an official from the Court of Judicial Review and the Imperial Carriage Fu. He in order to make an issue out of the debt to deal with the Wang clan. If Su Bai wanted to deal with him, Wang Chong could still remain calm. However, if he were to make things difficult for the Wang clan, it would be equivalent to shedding all pretense of cordiality. If he were to allow Su Bai to come and leave in one piece, he wouldn't be Wang Chong. In an instant, the entrance of the Wang clan became even quieter, and the atmosphere became even more peculiar. The scions that Su Bai brought along didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Even though Wang Chong seemed to be an easygoing person at times, there were other times that he could instill fear in others. The current Wang Chong might seem calm, but for some reason, he exuded an aura that left others in awe. What do you want? Don't tell me you still dare to stop me and attack me in front of so many people? Su Bai sneered coldly. He was more than willing to see Wang Chong make a move on him. In terms of martial arts, he was much stronger than Wei Hao, so there was no way Wang Chong would be a match for him. Before so many people, including the censors and officials from the Court of Judicial Review, he didn't believe that Wang Chong would dare to order the guards of the Wang clan to make a move on him. Don't worry. I won't order anyone to make a move on you. How could Wang Chong not know what Su Bai was thinking? If Su Bai thought that he had to make a move personally to deal with Wang Chong, he was gravely mistaken. What Wang Chong wanted wasn't as simple as a little physical pain. Su Bai, it's fine if you want to leave. However, I'm afraid that I'll have to trouble you to make a trip to the prisons of the Great Tang's capital. Wang Chong sneered coldly. Upon hearing those words, Su Bai's expression immediately warped. You dare? Why wouldn't I dare? Wang Chong turned to look at Censor Fu. Censor Fu, you have made groundless accusations against an important official of the royal court. According to the laws of the Tang dynasty, you should be punished accordingly. For slandering an important official of the royal court, you should be thrown into the imperial prison for 100 years. 3 years later, you will be flogged and exiled to the borders. These words weren't spoken by Censor Fu but the two officials from the Court of Judicial Review whom Su Bai invited over. Other than keeping records of the contracts and supervising the execution of the contracts, the Court of Judicial Review also had another important function, to oversee the prisons. In terms of the laws of the Tang dynasty, no one was more familiar with them than these officials from the Court of Judicial Review. Boom! The words of the two officials were as though a bolt of lightning striking down from the sky. Everyone's face warped in shock. Su Bai's body trembled, and his face turned as pale as a sheet of paper. Even Censor Fu He, who had not participated in the discussion, had a dark expression on his face. Making groundless accusations against an important official of the royal court was a heinous crime stipulated in the laws of the Tang dynasty, and it wasn't just any ordinary heinous crime. An important official of the royal court was the backbone of the empire. If there wasn't any concrete evidence, how could anyone malign an important official of the royal court? Thus, the royal court dealt heavy punishments for such cases. This was to put an end to such situations. It wasn't to say that important officials of the royal court couldn't be touched. It was just that those who harbored malicious intentions had to be dealt a heavy blow. Previously, Su Bai had only thought about bringing down the Wang clan. He didn't think about what would happen if he failed. Wang Chong's father was a great general of the borders, his big uncle was an important official of the royal court, and his grandfather Duke Jiu was deeply trusted by the Holy Emperor. By bringing down the Wang clan, Su Bai had offended all of them. When Wang Chong said that he was maligning an important official of the royal court, he wasn't wrong in the slightest. This time Wang Chong was determined to teach Su Bai a harsh lesson. Lord Censor, did you hear that? If the emperor breaks the law, he will be punished the same as the commoners. Lord Censor, you won't treat Su Bai specially just because of his relationship with Duke of Su, right? The fact that the two officials from the Court of Judicial Review would speak up for him was out of Wang Chong's expectations. However, this was even better. He wanted to see if Su Bai had the ability to extricate himself today. Wang Gongzi, one should be lenient wherever possible. Madam Wang, Su Gongzi is still young, and both your elder brother and Duke of Su hold positions in the royal court. It would be detrimental to the country if they were to fall out over a child's matter. What do you think, Madam Wang? Fu He turned to Madam Wang and asked. He had a slight relationship with Duke of Su, Su Fuwei, otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to Su Bai's request and come with him. Maligning an important official of the royal court wasn't a small matter. If Su Bai were to be arrested and sent to the Court of Judicial Review because of this matter, he wouldn't be able to live with it. It was even harder to say what would happen to Duke of Su. However, Fu He also knew that it was useless to look for Wang Chong for this matter. Thus his gaze turned to Madame Wang Zhaoshuhua. In this aspect, Madame Wang was much easier to deal with than Wang Chong. As long as Madame Wang spoke up, this matter could be reduced to a small one. Lord Fu, I'm just a woman, and I don't understand the affairs of the royal court. The royal court has its own laws, so let's do as we should. Don't you agree, Lord Fu? Zhao Shuhua was also determined. This Su Bai clearly didn't come with good intentions, and he seemed to be making use of this opportunity to blow things up. If not for his third son, Wang Chong's wits, as well as the fact that he somehow managed to attract this group of Imperial Army soldiers, things would have been much more difficult today. The Wang clan had a clean reputation for generations, and her father-in-law had always been strict with himself. If today's matter were to be reported to the royal court by the censor, the Wang clan's clean reputation would be ruined. She wouldn't be able to answer to her father-in-law. Furthermore, when Censor Fu was dealing with the Wang clan, he acted as though he was in the right and didn't want to spare anyone. Yet, he changed his attitude towards Su Bai, saying that one should be forgiving wherever possible. This made Madame Wang feel disgust towards him, and it was even more impossible for her to help him. Madam! Fu He's face darkened. He didn't expect Madame Wang to suddenly become so domineering. Don't speak anymore. Lord Fu, the royal court has its own rules. Are you trying to disregard them now? Wang Chong immediately interrupted Censor Fu He, not giving him a chance to speak. With a cold face, Wang Chong turned to the two corpse-like officials of the Court of Judicial Review and said, Lords, I have always respected the Court of Judicial Review. It can't be that you will let Su Bai off just because his father is a duke? How can that be? The voices of the two officials of the Court of Judicial Review sounded like music to Wang Chong's ears. Men, bring Su Bai back to me. If he escapes, you can carry your heads back to the Court of Judicial Review. Yes, Lord. Two men had already walked over and grabbed Su Bai by his sides, dragging him into the carriage. Bastard Wang Chong. I won't let you off. Just you wait. Chapter 77. Su Bai was quickly dragged away. Even though his father, the Duke of Su, wielded immense authority, it would still take some time for him to settle the matter. This period of time was sufficient for Su Bai to stay in the prison for a period of time, and remember this lesson for the rest of his life. Let's go. We'll talk in the residence. After leaving the matters outside to Menglong and Shunhai to handle, Wang Chong beckoned the Imperial Army commanders to head into the residence. Wang Gongzi is truly capable. The group of Imperial Army generals saw it clearly and raised their thumbs up in praise. In the eyes of the Imperial Army commanders, not only did Wang Chong's actions mean nothing, they even approved of it. Chuckling, Wang Chong led them into the lounge without a word. After a brief conversation, even though the king wasn't sure of the exact details, he was certain that the reason why so many Imperial Army commanders were gathered at the entrance was related to Zhao Fengchen. Their intentions were simple as well. They were here to buy swords. Some of them even brought a carriage full of gold over. As for the others, they felt that the agates, pearls and gems that Wang Chong had embedded on the Wuxia steel sword were too cheap. Thus, they personally brought a huge box of top-notch agates, pearls and gems over for Wang Chong to choose from. In other words, as long as they could get their hands on a Wuxia steel sword, they were willing to pay any price. As Wang Chong listened to their words, he fell into deep thought. The Wuxia steel sword had already made a name for itself through the sale of the Blue Bottle Pavilion. Wei Hao's two swords had helped him sever the swords of all the prestigious clans, thus establishing his reputation as the #1 sword in the world. And by selling the first Wuxia steel sword to Zhao Fengchen, he had successfully made a name for himself in the Imperial Army. In this unique group, Wang Chong could be said to have opened up a market for himself. However, the next matter would be even more important. Given that so many Imperial Army members were here to request for swords, it was impossible for Wang Chong to agree to all of them. Otherwise, if everyone in the Imperial Army were to have one, the price of the Wuxia steel would plummet. This was definitely not in line with Wang Chong's plan to strike it rich. However, with so many Imperial guards around, it was impossible for him to reject them. I'm sure you already know how sharp Wuxia steel is. Just as the Imperial Army members were discussing their requests, Wang Chong suddenly spoke up. The moment he opened his mouth, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. The more powerful the sword, the more time it takes. An ordinary iron sword might take half a day, but a top-notch one definitely wouldn't be as fast. Wang Chong said, that's right. Young master is right. I heard that those swordsmithing clans take more than a month to forge an ordinary sword. Since young master is forging the world's #1 sword, it's only natural that you'll have to spend more effort and time on it. If young master is worried about time, there's no rush. We can afford to wait. The group of people chimed in one after another. This was not flattery but sincere admiration. Although Wang Chong was only 15 years old, in the eyes of the crowd, his title as the world's #1 swordsmith was well deserved. He had earned it with his own strength. Regardless of how old he was, such a figure would be recognized by everyone. More importantly, they had witnessed the prowess of the Wuxia steel sword with their own eyes, and it had left them deeply shocked. If not for that, they wouldn't have rushed to the Wang family residence. Since everyone understands that's for the best, Wang Chong faintly smiled from his chair. He was not very old, but amongst this group of Imperial Army officers of extraordinary status, he naturally exuded a mature, magnanimous, and steady aura that did not seem to be at a disadvantage. I'm not opposed to everyone wanting to buy a sword. However, I have my own rules. At this point, Wang Chong paused. His voice was calm and confident, and it felt convincing. All of the Imperial Army commanders listened attentively to Wang Chong's words. Every swordsmith had their own unique habits and rules, and the crowd was no exception to Wang Chong's rules. Thus they listened attentively. Firstly, the swords I forge are all top-notch. Thus, every single one of them takes a huge amount of time and effort. As such, I will need a month to forge them. No problem at all. The crowd nodded in agreement. The reason why they wanted to buy Wang Chong's swords was because of the uniqueness of his swords, which far surpassed the quality of other swords. Otherwise, there would be no need for them to go through so much trouble with the many sword shops and smiths in the capital. Everyone was impressed by Wang Chong's seriousness and focus. Secondly, I only know how to forge every single sword. Thus, every single sword will be unique in terms of design and style. Furthermore, there won't be a second one. Wang Chong raised a finger and said. These thoughts had just formed in Wang Chong's mind. The rarer something was, the greater its value. These Imperial Army commanders were just the beginning. If everyone in the world were to view him as the #1 swordsmith in the world, he would never forge the same weapon. Only then would he be able to establish his image and maximize his profits. To forge a single weapon every month, and every single weapon would have a different design and style, such a requirement would definitely place a huge pressure on other swordsmiths. However, to Wang Chong, who had accumulated a huge amount of knowledge, this wasn't a problem at all. Don't. Can you forge 2, 3, or 4 swords every month? Initially, the crowd nodded in agreement. However, when they heard that Wang Chong was only forging a single sword every month, they couldn't help but wail. There are so many of us here, how can that be enough? There were at least 30 to 40 Imperial Army commanders here. If Wang Chong were to forge a single sword every month, how long would it take for him to gather enough swords? That's even simpler. Upon hearing those words, Wang Chong chuckled. I'll hold an auction every month, and every single sword will be of higher quality than the previous one. If anyone is interested, you can participate. Whoever offers the highest price will be able to buy it. However, I'll have to warn you first. The slots for the auction are limited, so not everyone can participate. Only those who have left a deposit for the sword will be allowed to participate in the auction. As for those who are here today, I can give you a discount. In the future, you'll be able to get a 10% discount when buying a sword. As for those who come later, the discount won't be the same. Boom! Initially, the crowd thought that Wang Chong was forging too few swords, so they wanted to argue with Wang Chong. However, when they heard that the slots for the auction were limited, they immediately charged forward. Wang Gongzi, no problem. I'm willing to pay as much as you want. Wang Gongzi, how much is the deposit? I'll bring it over right now. Wang Gongzi, you must sell it to me. I'm your loyal buyer. Wang Gongzi, reserve a spot for me. Everyone scrambled to be the first to rush over. They weren't the only commanders in the imperial army. They were the first batch to arrive. If they were any later, things wouldn't have turned out this way. In a while, when those people all arrived, it was unknown what would happen to them. As for the matter of only forging a single sword every month, that was nothing. Which of those famous swordsmiths wasn't the same? More importantly, Wang Chong had already said that every single sword was unique. Their design, style, and appearance would be different from one another. Furthermore, given the reputation of the #1 sword in the world, even if they didn't use it themselves, they could still sell it off in the future to earn a huge profit. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had witnessed the prowess of the weapon and were willing to sell it. As for the matter of only forging a single sword every month, wasn't it just a matter of money? As long as it could be solved with money, everything would be fine. Seeing a large group of people swarming over, Wang Chong was overjoyed. In the other world, selling swords for a deposit was a common method to sell real estate. Without doing anything, one could gather a huge sum of money. Wang Chong was applying what he had learned on the spot. At this moment, what Wang Chong needed the most was a huge sum of gold. If he were to give each of the imperial army commanders a set of gold each, it would be a huge sum. It didn't take long for him to cash in the promissory note at the front door. It was just a few gold taels for each of them. Wang Chong called Shen Hai and Meng Long back and began writing the promissory note. The price of the Wuxia steel sword at the Blue Bottle Pavilion had already reached 40,000 gold taels. Thus, Wang Chong's entry fee for the auction was 20,000 gold taels. This wasn't a low price, but it wasn't too high either. It was a good way to determine those who were interested in buying the sword. As for the deposit, Wang Chong explained, every deposit would correspond to one entry fee for the auction. Those who held the entry fee issued by Wang Chong would have the right to bid for the sword. If one was unable to buy the sword, the deposit could be refunded. Of course, if one didn't wish to refund the deposit, the entry fee could be sold to others as well. Wang Chong acknowledged this as well. Furthermore, as the first batch of participants, regardless of who it was, they would be able to enjoy a 10% discount from Wang Chong. This way, the entry fee would become a hot commodity, and no one would be willing to refund their money. Wang Chong possessed the knowledge and memories of an entire world. In this aspect, there was no one in the world who could compare to him. With the help of Shen Hai and Meng Long, all 30 Imperial Army commanders were able to write down a total of 30 notes. The deposit of 20,000 gold taels for each of them added up to more than 600,000 gold taels. This was a huge sum of money. Wang Chong's ability to earn money left Meng Long and Shen Hai in awe. Not only the two of them, the guards, maids, servants, and nannies of the Wang clan who had rushed over upon hearing the news were also dumbfounded. Their young master was too inconceivable. To be able to earn more than 600,000 gold taels just by writing a few notes, how was this impressive? This was simply a heaven-defying skill. Compared to the young master, even the most formidable merchant in the capital, the one who knew how to make money, became insignificant, unworthy of a mention. Am I dreaming? Young master. Is this really the young master of our clan? Our Wang clan will become a wealthy clan in the future. The nannies, servants, maids and guards who had served the Wang clan for decades widened their eyes in shock, and their bodies trembled in agitation. One of the old nannies was so excited that he suddenly fainted. My God! They had served the Wang clan for their entire lives, but they had never seen so much money before. The Wang clan had been thrifty their entire lives, and this time they had finally struck it rich. In the blink of an eye, a few more nannies fainted from agitation. Even when they fainted, their faces were filled with excitement and bliss. Chapter 78. All of the commanders of the Imperial Army came in high spirits and left in high spirits. Even though they didn't manage to obtain Wang Chong's Wuxia steel sword, it was sufficient for them to obtain priority in the auction of the world's #1 swordsmith, not to mention a 10% discount. There were many commanders in the Imperial Army, and there were many who held higher positions than them. But before the small note in their hands, they had no choice but to back down. As for the 20,000 gold taels, it wasn't a problem at all. To be able to become a commander in the elite imperial army of the Tang dynasty, which of them didn't have a background? Even though 20,000 gold taels wasn't a small sum, it wasn't much to them. After sending off the imperial army commanders and making the necessary arrangements, Wang Chong stepped into his mother Zhao Shuhua's room. His mother had always been served by nannies and maids, but this time, other than Wang Chong and Madame Wang, there was no one else in the room. The 600,000 gold taels piled up like a small mountain, and it was a huge shock to Madame Wang. The Wang clan was a clan of ministers and generals, and Madame Wang was a knowledgeable person. Yet, Wang Chong was able to earn 600,000 gold taels in the blink of an eye. This was a huge shock to Zhao Shuhua and the Wang clan, who had always insisted on being honest. A gentleman loves money, but he acquires it in a proper way. If Wang Chong had colluded with some shady people to obtain the gold taels, Zhao Shuhua wouldn't have tolerated it. But in that moment, she witnessed all of the commanders of the imperial army happily sending gold and gems to the Wang clan. In fact, some of them even hated themselves for not sending enough. It was clear that Wang Chong's money had come from a legitimate source. Chong, what is going on? The room was silent. Madame Wang sat on the chair and looked at Wang Chong. She finally asked the question that had been bothering her in her heart. She still hadn't recovered from the shock of the 600,000 gold taels. There were simply too many things that Wang Chong was hiding from her. It's time for me to come clean. Wang Chong stood in front of his mother with his head lowered. A thought flashed through his mind. Although it wasn't the best time, it was better than not saying anything. This incident had taught Wang Chong a huge lesson. Sometimes what you think is good doesn't necessarily mean it's good. After sorting out his thoughts, Wang Chong told him everything that had happened in Hyderabad. So, you borrowed money from the rich and powerful to raise the money to forge the sword? Madame Wang said. Wang Chong gave a nod of acknowledgement. Madame Wang stared at Wang Chong, sizing him up carefully. There was an indescribable feeling in her heart. For a moment, Zhao Shuhua had a strange feeling in her heart, but in the next moment, she felt gratified as a mother. Chong, you've truly grown up. Madame Wang stared at Wang Chong said. Which mother didn't wish for their son to succeed in life? The current Wang Chong had already achieved her expectations. Money had always been the weakness of the Wang clan. In the entire Wang clan, including Big Uncle Wang Zhen, Big Aunt Wang Rushuang, Little Uncle and Wang Chong himself, there wasn't a single person who possessed talent in business. Wang Chong's Big Uncle Wang Zhen could be considered as someone who knew how to manage a business. Among the few clans, he was the one who had the best financial situation and managed to manage a few businesses. But that was all there was to it. Compared to those truly rich and powerful families, it was a world of difference. The Wang clan wasn't one who was skilled in business. Including Wang Chong's big brother and second brother, none of them possessed the ability to manage a business. But now Zhao Shuhua saw an astonishing talent in her youngest son, one that far surpassed anyone else. More than 600,000 gold taels. This amount of wealth was enough for all the members of the Wang clan to spend for a few decades without doing anything. Mother, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have hidden this matter from you. Wang Chong lowered his head and apologized. Madame Wang shook her head. Child, through this matter, mother can also feel that you have really become more mature in handling matters. In the future, there's no need for you to tell me about some matters. Just go ahead and do it. Mother believes in you. Mother, Wang Chong was moved. Looking at his mother, he was speechless. Leaving his mother's room, Wang Chong felt much more relaxed. Even though he was nearly made use of by Su by this time, it turned out to be a good thing. Through this matter, he had won his mother's trust and received her promise to go ahead and do it. After practicing his martial arts for a while in the courtyard, Wang Chong's big uncle Li Lin rushed into the Wang clan. Did those imperial army commanders come? Uncle Li Lin asked as soon as he entered. Wang Chong nodded his head. Those fellows sure reacted quickly. No matter how hard I tried, I still couldn't catch up to them. Li Lin shook his head with a smile. Ever since he was promoted from his position as the Northern Gate Guard, Li Lin seemed to be in high spirits, and he was more talkative. Uncle, did something happen in the royal palace? Does it have something to do with Zhao Fengqin? Wang Chong asked. When Wang Chong tried to probe, the Imperial Army commanders were very secretive about it. They just didn't say what had happened. However, there were some things that couldn't be hidden from Wang Chong. That's right. Zhao Fengchen defeated Huang Xiaotian and was promoted to the Imperial Army commander. He's the only new commander in the past few years. Before Wang Chong, Li Lin didn't beat around the bush and revealed the truth. Commander Zhao's strength is around the same level as Huang Xiaotian's. In fact, Huang Xiaotian might even be slightly stronger. However, this time he had the advantage of a weapon. Commander Zhao's sword not only broke Huang Xiaotian's famed palace treasured sword, Snow Drinker, but it also broke his tempered adamantine armor in one fell swoop and almost split his body apart. There were quite a few people watching the battle back then, and there was even an Imperial Army commander among them. Everyone was scared stiff by Commander Zhao's sword. Those fellows must have been by the side and slipped away soon. To think that they would come to your place. Huang Xiaotian and Zhao Fengchen's promotion was a huge matter in the Imperial Army. Not only did it involve the position of a commander, it also involved the internal strife within the Imperial Army. Wang Chong couldn't be clearer on this point. Even though Uncle Li Lin didn't go into detail, Wang Chong could sense that the battle must have been extremely dangerous. It's a good thing that Lord Zhao has been promoted to commander, Wang Chong said. Following which, he revealed the matter regarding the 600,000 gold taels. The relationship between Zhao Fengchen and Huang Xiaotian had changed because of him. In the future, many major events would change as well. Wang Chong was well aware that after being promoted to commander and receiving the resources of the palace, Zhao Fengchen's path of promotion would be even smoother, and he would probably reach the position of Grand Commander even faster. On the other hand, Uncle Li Lin had contributed greatly by presenting the sword to Zhao Fengchen. In the future, he would have a bright future in the Imperial Army. With this relationship, it would be much easier for Wang Chong to sell his sword in the Imperial Army in the future. Furthermore, Uncle Li Lin had always been the weakest link in the Wang clan. If he could follow Zhao Fengchen and rise through the ranks in the Imperial Army, the strength of the entire Wang clan would rise along with him. Today's matter won't be the first wave. Most likely, more people will come looking for us in the future. Thus, I would like to leave this matter to Uncle. With Lord Zhao's backing in the royal palace, it will be much easier for Uncle to deal with this matter, Wang Chong said. Wang Chong was prepared to let Uncle Li Lin handle all matters regarding the Wuxia steel sword in the Imperial Army, including the auction priority, as well as the auction. This wasn't just a matter of convenience or his identity as an Imperial Army member. Rather, through this matter, Uncle Li Lin's standing in the Imperial Army would be raised significantly. When most of the Imperial Army commanders, and even the Grand Marshal would need Uncle Li Lin's help, his standing in the Imperial Army could be imagined. His future path of promotion would probably be much faster than his uncle had imagined. Furthermore, with the protection of Zhao Fengchen and the Zhao clan, no one would dare to cause trouble for him. What was even more incredible was that the commanders of the Imperial Army who wanted the Wuxia steel sword came from all factions. This would, in turn, boost the standing of Uncle Li Lin and Zhao Fengchen in the Imperial Army, making it much easier for them to get promoted in the future. That is, if these people still wanted to buy the Wuxia steel sword in the future. All in all, only in the hands of Uncle Li Lin would the Wuxia steel sword be able to bring out the greatest effect. Don't worry, I know what to do. Right, your aunt asked you when you are free. If you are free, you should visit Uncle's residence and chat with your cousin so that you can offer him some pointers. That fellow is arrogant, but he's too arrogant. Your aunt and I hope that you can teach him a lesson on our behalf, Li Lin said. Wang Chong smiled. His aunt and uncle had a son, Wang Liang. Even though uncle's surname was Li, he followed Big Aunt's surname. In the prestigious clans, it was common for one's maternal clan to be powerful and one's paternal side to be weak. His aunt and uncle had high hopes for cousin Wang Liang, but it was a pity that cousin seemed to be getting further and further away from their expectations. All right, I'll go when I'm free, Wang Chong said. It would be grandfather's birthday soon, and according to the rules, cousin would have to attend as well. It would be the same if they met again. As for now, with more than 600,000 gold taels, there were many things that Wang Chong could do. He could truly display his prowess. After sending uncle off without any hesitation, Wang Chong brought Shanhai Minglong. and a chest of gold to the white agate jewelry shop. There he found the 2 Sindhi monks, Ablanadin and Arloja. "Masters, I have brought the money for the 300 June of Hyderabad ores." Wang Chong pointed and gestured. Peng, Shun Hai and Meng Long carried a chest and placed it heavily before Ablanadin and Arloja. "There's 80,000 gold taels in here. Take it," Wang Chong confidently said, his voice resonating. Even with Ablanadin and Arloja's composure, their hearts couldn't help but tremble upon hearing Wang Chong's words. But amidst their shock, they were also doubtful. "But Gongzi, didn't you give us more than 30,000 gold taels previously? Furthermore, didn't you exchange the rest for rations? Why are you giving us so much gold? This has already far exceeded 90,000 gold taels." 80,000 gold taels, along with the 30,000 gold taels that Wang Chong had given them previously, amounted to more than 110,000 gold taels, far exceeding the agreed-upon amount. Chapter 79. Ha ha ha, I won't hide it from the two of you. Due to your Hyderabad ores, I have earned quite a sum of money this time. Thus, I made a sudden decision to raise the value of our transaction from 300 gold taels per June to 400 gold taels per June. Wang Chong chuckled. Ah, the two were astonished. "I know that Sindhu is in urgent need of this money, so feel free to take it. Take the extra money as my advance payment for the next batch. Of course, this is only the first batch. In the future, as we work together, this price can be raised further," Wang Chong said. Gongzi. The two were even more astonished. However, they were even more moved. Many people said that business was business, so other than business, there was no relationship between them, needless to say friendship. Sindhu's situation was extremely dire, and no amount of money could save it. The two wanted to ask for help, but who would lend them money? Wang Chong had earned a sum of money, so there was no need for him to give them more money. This was no longer just a simple business deal. "Young master, we will definitely engrave this kindness into our hearts. We thank you on behalf of Sindhu. Gongzi, don't worry, we will repay you generously in the future." Ablanadin and Arloja lowered their heads and said sincerely. Wang Chong smiled silently. Wang Chong wasn't a fool. Before the two of them said anything, he raised the value of the transaction from 300 gold taels per June to 400 gold taels, raising the price by a third. Wang Chong wasn't someone who had nowhere to spend his money, but someone who was thinking on a deeper level. After receiving the advance payment of more than 600 gold taels from the 30 Imperial Army commanders, the first thing Wang Chong thought of was how to maintain the supply of Hyderabad ores and obtain more ores. A single Wuxia steel sword wouldn't be of much use, and 300 Wuxia steel swords were limited as well. They could only be used in small-scale battles, and they couldn't be used strategically. In order to achieve the terrifying effect of influencing the outcome of a war, the Wuxia steel sword had to be equipped with an army group, at least tens of thousands of soldiers. Only then would it be able to display its invincible power on the battlefield. Only then could he help Wang Chong complete his unfinished wish and mission. Therefore, from the very beginning, Wang Chong's ambition was not limited to 300 June of Hyderabad ore, but the entire Hyderabad or mountain range. If possible, Wang Chong even wanted to buy the entire mine. And that 600,000 taels of gold had made Wang Chong's ambition somewhat feasible. Sindhu was a long distance away from the Central Plains, but it was much closer to the Abbasid Caliphate in Karaxpazinu. This was a reality that Wang Chong had to consider when competing for the Hyderabad ore. The pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. One was near while the other was far away. Considering from the perspective of Sindhu, it was impossible for them to prioritize the distant Central Plains over the nearby Abbasid Caliphate in Karaxpazinu. If Wang Chong wanted to compete against the Abbasid Caliphate in Karaxpazinu, he could only make an issue out of the price. Even though Ablanadin and Arloja didn't say it explicitly, Wang Chong could guess that 300 gold taels per June was Sindhu's base price. Otherwise, they wouldn't have said that they wouldn't accept a single gold tael less. The Abbasid Caliphate in Karaxpazinu would surely offer the same price as well. One doesn't wake up early without benefits. If Sindhu could obtain more benefits from him, they would surely prioritize the faraway Central Plains over Karaxpazinu and Abbasid Caliphate. At the same time, if Sindhu were to obtain more benefits from him, They would have higher expectations for the Abbasid Caliphate and Charax-Spasinu. However, Abbasid Caliphate and Charax-Spasinu would find it hard to accept such a drastic increase in the price. They would never do such a thing. Increasing the conflict between the two would only benefit him. This was Wang Chong's true ambition and scheme. A few tens of thousands of gold taels was a small matter. What was truly important was to obtain the largest supply of Hyderabad ores. Walking out of the white agate shop, Wang Chong couldn't help but burst into laughter. Then he drove to the Ghost Tree district. Following Subai's arrest and imprisonment in the Court of Judicial Review, news of what had happened at the Wang family residence spread like wildfire to all of the nobles in the capital. What? Subai was arrested. The person who sold the swords at the Bluebottle Pavilion is Wang Chong. When the news reached the Yao family residence, Yao Feng slammed his hand on the table with shock in his eyes. He had been waiting for news from Subai, but he didn't expect to receive such news instead. Yes, Gongzi. Upon receiving the news, Duke of Su had already left the court to save Su Gongzi. As for Wang Chong's side, we saw it with our own eyes. Many imperial army commanders brought carriages full of gold and jewels to the Wang family to seek an audience. Every single one of them proclaimed Wang Chong as the #1 swordsmith in the world. Kneeling on the floor, Gao Fei reported. When the incident happened, Gao Fei was among the crowd as well. However, he was extremely careful. Knowing that Wang Chong knew him, he had been acting cautiously so as to not attract the attention of Wang Chong. Subai was arrested, and Wang Chong was the #1 swordsmith in the Bluebottle Pavilion. Even now, he was still shocked by the news and found it hard to believe. 40,000 taels for a sword. What kind of sword is worth so much? He's just a kid who's still wet behind the ears. How could he have such an ability? Yao Feng gritted his teeth. Not too long ago, Wang Chong was just a profligate scion in the capital, a target for him to exact vengeance on the Wang clan. In fact, Wang Chong was able to play him in the palms of his hands with just the lowly ma zhou. But in an instant Wang Chong became the #1 swordsmith in the world. The reversal was too shocking, such that Yao Feng found it hard to believe and accept it. We don't know either. However, it's impossible for the imperial army to be mistaken. Furthermore, Su Gongzi asked them if they were mistaken. But in the end, he only received mockery from the imperial army. Kneeling on the floor, Gao Fei said. The shock brought about by Wang Chong's hidden identity wasn't limited to just the few people in the room. In fact, all of the profligate scions present had received a huge shock. When he arrived, a large number of scions had gathered in the Eight Gods Pavilion to discuss this matter. Through this matter, Wang Chong's standing among the scions had risen to a level that ordinary people couldn't reach. The Wang clan was a clan of generals and ministers, and it didn't pale in comparison to the Yao clan. The Yao clan's old master Yao had students all over the world, and the Wang clan's Duke Zhou also had students all over the continent. The Yao clan had King Qi as their backing, and the Wang clan had the King of Song as their backing. Just that, the Wang clan wasn't good at business, and this had always been their weakness. But if the Wang clan could make up for this weakness and become wealthy as well, then the Wang clan wouldn't pale in comparison to the Yao clan. Now, when people talked about Wang Chong in private, they would say that he wasn't inferior to Yao Feng at all, and that he was one of the most powerful scions in the capital. However, Gao Fei didn't dare to say all of this to Yao Feng. The room was silent. Yao Feng stood silently in the room, and his face was dark. I wasted so much of my time for a Subai. Looks like it's time to carry out that plan. Yao Feng's mind was in turmoil. You can leave now. Tell Duke of Su that I'll find a way to get my father's cooperation to save Subai. Yao Feng said. Thank you, Gongzi. Delighted, Gao Fei took his leave. Looking at Gao Fei's back, Yao Feng sneered coldly. Even though Gao Fei didn't say it explicitly, how could he not guess that Duke of Su had sent him here? Slandering an important official of the royal court. Wang Chong, you sure are ruthless. Yao Feng sneered. Wang Chong and Subai were 15 and 17 years old respectively, and they were both children. Normally, such a matter wouldn't reach the Court of Judicial Review. However, Subai was useless, and Wang Chong managed to grab hold of his sore spot. Even though slandering an important official of the royal court wasn't enough to kill him, it was more than enough for him to suffer. Duke of Su might be influential, but he didn't have any connections in the Bureau of Punishments. Thus, he could only rely on the Yao clan for this matter. Leaving the room, Yao Feng headed into the inner residence. At the same time, a messenger pigeon flew out from his robes and flew out of the Yao clan's residence. The messenger pigeon soared into the sky and flew through the air toward a tavern in the east of the city. Shua! Before the pigeon could descend, a pong sound could be heard as the window opened. A black shadow flashed and the pigeon was caught. It has finally begun. A cold voice drifted out from the room, and then there was no more sound. Even the pigeon seemed to have disappeared from the room. The moonlight shone on the ground, the walls and the roof, forming a layer of white frost. Under the moonlight, a few masked figures dressed in black stood on a roof not too far away from the Wang family residence. These black-clothed men were tall, and each of them held a sharp saber in their hands. Their gazes were fixed on the Wang family residence. Do you all understand the mission this time? No matter what, we have to obtain the number 1 sword of the Central Plains. Also, we have to kill as few people as possible. The Wang family is a clan of generals and ministers in the Central Plains. If a large number of people were to die, the royal court would investigate the matter. This is extremely disadvantageous to us from the western regions. The leader of the masked men stood at the very front and said, without needing anyone to expose him, he had already revealed his identity. In reality, their physique was different from that of the people of the Central Plains. Even if they were to hide under black clothes, it was useless. Yes, leader. The group lowered their heads and didn't say a single word. With a single look, it was clear that they had gone through strict training to obey orders. Very good. These are bewildering smoke. Bring 5 of them each. If you see anyone from the Wang clan, just throw them on the ground and they will faint soon. Remember, the Wang clan has many guards, and they are a clan of generals and ministers. There are often imperial army patrolling the area. Thus, our goal isn't to fight with them or kill everyone from the Wang clan. What we want is to swiftly obtain the sword and hand it over to the Lord. This is the prerequisite. Don't get caught up in the battle, understand? The leader of the black-clothed men said, Yes, leader. The group of black-clothed men replied, Good. Let's move. Chapter 80. Hua. In the room, Wang Chong spread out a 3 qilong xian paper and dipped it in ink. He began to consider the design of the second Wuxia steel sword for auction. The imperial army wasn't a fool. Those who could reach their current position were all capable individuals. Even though they were straightforward in giving away money, the more straightforward they were, the higher their expectations of the sword. Thus, the sword that Wang Chong forged had to be able to subdue them. It's fortunate that the swords and sabers in this world are rather simplistic. I still have many choices. Wang Chong thought. In this era, there were many sword merchants like the few swordsmithing clans. As they only focused on the sharpness of the swords and neglected the appearance of the swords, most of the swords and sabers were made in the same style. In comparison, Wang Chong could be said to be a grandmaster in this aspect. As the saying goes, even good wine fears the alley. Packaging wasn't just important for swords and sabers. A Tao Guan and a Celadon. Many people would definitely pay more attention to the Celadon. A sword that was more aesthetically pleasing to the eye would definitely be different from ordinary swords and sabers. I've already tried using a sword previously. Perhaps I should try using a saber for the second auction. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. Sabers and swords were always the 2 kings of all weapons. Even though there were more people who used swords than sabers in the Central Plains, the status of sabers wasn't low. This was because sabers were more difficult to wield. Unless one was a top-notch expert, it would be difficult for one to wield a saber well. And in the Imperial Army, Wang Chong knew of a few top-notch generals who wielded sabers. If Wang Chong wanted to establish his position as the number 1 swordsmith in the world, he couldn't just forge swords. He had to establish a supreme position in the field of sabers as well. All of the generals in the Imperial Army were picky individuals. If he wanted to satisfy them, he couldn't just use an ordinary saber. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. Soon he thought of something. In the future, other than the Wuxia steel sword, the other one was the Japanese saber. The Japanese katana originated from the Tang dynasty's Mo Dao, but it was easier to slash than the Mo Dao, and more effort was put into its shape. However, Japan did not exist in this world. Wang Chong did not plan to simply imitate the Japanese sword. Instead, he planned to use the Japanese sword as a foundation to design a new sword. Dipping the brush in ink, Wang Chong pondered for a moment before drawing on the xian paper. A moment later, a brand new sword that was different from any other sword in this world appeared on the paper. This sword had the same curvature as the Japanese saber, but it was more than twice as long, reaching more than 6 feet, almost 7 feet. The blade was long and narrow, and the sword was relatively narrow as well. Such a saber was completely unusable by ordinary people. It was basically the same as their height, but Wang Chong didn't care. This kind of 6 feet long sword was wide and thick, and weighed more than 60 kilograms. For ordinary people it was impossible to use, but for martial artists with extraordinary strength, it was easy to hack and slash, and could precisely display the greatest lethality. Wang Chong was certain that such a saber would be a fatal attraction to those top-notch saber commanders in the Imperial Army. However, the materials required will increase significantly. I'll need at least 2 June, Wang Chong thought. Wang Chong only spent a June of ores to forge the Wuxia steel sword, but the forging of such a sword would require at least 2 June. Even though the cost would increase, the price would also increase correspondingly. His profits would only be greater. Just as he was contemplating, he suddenly heard a slight sound of wind. Hearing this, Wang Chong frowned and immediately stopped. Someone's here. Wang Chong's eyebrows twitched as he immediately realized what was going on. Even though he had lost all of his martial arts and had to start from scratch, he still had his foresight and experience. This was definitely the sound of clothes fluttering in the wind. Someone had snuck into the Wang family residence. If you think that you can enter and leave the Wang family residence as you please, you are gravely mistaken. Wang Chong sneered coldly. Regardless of whether it was the 600,000 gold taels or the Wuxia steel sword, they were more than enough to attract the covetous eyes of many. A man's wealth is his own ruin. If Wang Chong didn't even have this bit of wariness in his heart, he would have been a fool to be the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains in his previous life. Blowing out the candle on the table, Wang Chong grabbed a Wuxia steel sword from the wall, pushed open the window and sneaked out. Back then at the Wei clan's smithy, Wang Chong forged a total of 4 swords. Only one of them was decorated with agate and gems, and the hilt and scabbard were gold-plated, making it look beautiful and elegant. As for the other swords, they weren't decorated. Furthermore, Wang Chong didn't intend to sell them either, so he kept them in the residence. The moonlight was like frost. Under the moonlight, one could clearly see black figures leaping from the roofs, the ground and the walls, heading in the direction of the Wang clan's storeroom. Very familiar. They must have scouted the place clearly during the day. Wang Chong thought. Every clan had their own storehouse to store gold, silver, and other important items. These people had sneaked into the Wang family residence, but their goal was clear. They had clearly scouted the area during the day, and understood the layout and structure of the Wang family residence from the nearby highlands. The Wang family residence was silent. These black-clothed men seemed to have entered the Wang family residence without alarming any maids, guards, or nannies. Wang Chong stood in the darkness and quietly watched, inwardly sneering, but he said nothing. General clans had strict restrictions on the number of guards and private soldiers they kept, but it was more than enough to deal with these people. It's about time. Just as the black-clothed men were about to reach the entrance of the Wang family residence's storehouse, a thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. Roar! Just as the black-clothed men were about to enter the Wang family residence's storehouse, a furious roar suddenly broke the silence. Like a clap of thunder, it reverberated throughout the entire Wang family residence. Who goes there? Along with the furious roar, the air trembled, and a black shockwave burst forth from the Wang family residence's storehouse. The black-clothed men paled in fright, and as though a broken kite, they were sent flying. Who dares to barge into Wang Gongzi's residence? With a furious roar like that of a lion, 2 thin but powerful figures rushed out of the Wang family residence, their sleeves fluttering in the wind. These words weren't spoken in the language of the Central Plains but in Sanskrit. It was a pity that no one could understand them. They're finally out. Seeing Ablonadin and Arloja charge out, Wang Chong finally smiled. This was what it meant to return a favor with aplomb. The 80,000 gold taels from yesterday wasn't spent in vain. Wang Chong only told them that he hoped that the two of them would help protect the Wang family residence and prevent anyone from coveting the Hyderabad ore and the several 100,000 gold taels. And the two of them agreed without any hesitation. Wang Chong was currently a major customer of Sindhu. If someone wanted to steal the money he used to buy the Hyderabad ore, they would be in deep trouble. There was no need for Wang Chong to explain this matter to the two of them. Boom! From afar, Ablonadin and Arloja charged into the crowd of black-clothed men like two lions, sweeping through everything in their path. With just the two of them, they managed to block the attacks of more than 10 black-clothed men. The roiling black shockwaves sent the black-clothed men flying like paper, crashing into the walls and the ground. Come out! Enemy attack! At the same time, the voices of the two Sindhi monks alarmed the guards of the Wang family residence. From his mother's residence, the guest hall, the rooms where the maids, nannies, and servants lived, many guards of the Wang family residence charged out. Preparedness ensures success, and unpreparedness leads to failure. Since Wang Chong had expected that the 600,000 gold taels and the Hyderabad ore would attract the attention of others, how could he not make preparations beforehand? His mother's residence, the maid's residence. Wang Chong had arranged for guards to guard all the important places. If not for this, Wang Chong wouldn't have been so daring as to not warn them when they entered. Kill! A large group of Wang family residence guards charged out from the corridors and rooms. The swords in their hands gleamed coldly under the moonlight. In just a short moment, the two groups of guards clashed fiercely in the courtyard. The guards of the Wang family residence weren't many among the clans of ministers and generals. But compared to these black-clothed men, they had far more guards. The sound of metal clanging echoed endlessly, and in just a short moment, the entire courtyard of the Wang family residence was filled with cold gleams. Someone is heading straight for my residence. Suddenly Wang Chong's ears twitched. He heard the sound of clothes fluttering in the wind. From the looks of it, it wasn't just the Wang family residence's storeroom. Even his own study was being searched. Xiao! Just when Wang Chong sensed that someone was approaching, there was a flash of cold light in the darkness. Several scimitars gleaming with cold light fiercely revolved in the air as they flew toward Wang Chong. Young master, be careful! Upon seeing this sight, Shun Hai and Meng Long, who were guarding Wang Chong's study, panicked. Shouting, they dashed out from the darkness. Wang! The air trembled, and in the blink of an eye, Meng Long abruptly threw out his sword. Clang! The sword struck one of the scimitars in midair, but the other scimitars continued flying toward Wang Chong at lightning speed. This is bad. Seeing the machetes flying toward Wang Chong, and the sharp blades seemed as though they were about to slice Wang Chong's head into two, the faces of the duo paled and cold sweat trickled down their backs. Wang! Even though Wang Chong's cultivation wasn't high, his reaction wasn't slow. Just as the machetes were about to reach him, Wang Chong tilted his body backward and executed a simple tortoise back, dodging the chain of attacks by a hair's breadth. His movements were calm and simple, and even the two Spazinu masked men were dumbfounded. Chapter 81. So, the scimitars spun rapidly in the air. After drawing a huge arc in the night, they flew into the hands of a few masked men in black. Only then did the masked men realize what was going on. Kill him! The few of them spoke in a language that Wang Chong couldn't understand. Wielding their machetes, they charged forward. Protect the young master! Shun Hai and Meng Long didn't hesitate. They immediately rushed over and stood beside Wang Chong to protect him. Meng Long! Catch! Wang Chong kicked Meng Long away and picked up the sword that had fallen to the ground. Meng Long caught the sword and started fighting with the masked men of Spazinu. The battle was extremely intense, but Wang Chong didn't participate in it. His strength wasn't sufficient, and he wasn't a match for these masked men. On top of that, Shun Hai and Meng Long were veterans who had retired from the military. Even though they had sustained some injuries in the previous battle, their experience and teamwork were still top-notch. Furthermore, more and more guards were gathering in the Wang family residence, and some of them were already rushing over. I didn't expect the saber of Carrick-Spazinu to have such a function. Wang Chong glanced at the machetes in the hands of the masked men. These machetes were like boomerangs, able to be shot out from their palms and be used as hidden weapons. This was the first time Wang Chong had seen such a method of usage. It could be seen that there was a high requirement for such a method. Otherwise, if one couldn't kill the opponent, they would be killed by the boomerangs. This can be considered as a butterfly effect. Wang Chong thought. In his previous life, Wang Chong didn't have any dealings with the Hyderabad ores. This time he was the one who bought the Hyderabad ores and forged the Wuxia steel sword, thus attracting the attention of these assassins. Menglong reef gazing moon. Shanghai white ape gazing back. Wang Chong suddenly shouted. Out of the blue, Menglong raised his sword and stabbed it diagonally into the chest of a masked man who had just leaped up. Shanghai tilted his head to the side and dodged a machete that was flying towards him in a flash. Menglong was still fine, but Shanghai broke out in cold sweat. If not for Wang Chong's timely warning, he would have been struck in the neck by the machete. That lad is up, kill him. The eyes of the masked men turned cold. They immediately sensed Wang Chong's presence. If it weren't for his reminder, one of the two guards would have already died. Humph! Wang Chong sneered coldly. Even though he didn't understand the language, he was still able to understand it. However, upon seeing one of the masked men trying to shake off Shanghai and Menglong to deal with him, he knew what they were up to. Before they could do anything, Wang Chong suddenly attacked. So, wielding the sword in his right hand, Wang Chong suddenly curled up together with his sword, and as though a bolt of lightning, he dashed in between Shanghai and Menglong. Young master, don't. Be careful. The faces of the duo paled in fright. Every single one of them was an Origin Energy Tier 8 expert, and they were skilled in assassinations. Furthermore, they were well coordinated, and none of them were a match for Wang Chong individually. Needless to say, all of them working together. By doing so, Wang Chong was placing himself in grave danger. Lad, you're courting death. Between Shanghai and Menglong, a black-clothed masked man also noticed Wang Chong pouncing toward him. Sneering savagely, the scimitar in his hands glowed brilliantly as he slashed it toward Wang Chong with the speed of a thunderbolt. The might behind this slash was so great that even the air around it exploded, causing a huge gale to blow. Wang Chong thrust his right foot into the ground, moving from extreme movement to extreme stillness, dodging the saber in a flash. But in an instant, Wang Chong abruptly dashed forward, and under the astonished gaze of the masked man, he sliced him into two. It's that sword! Everyone be careful! Upon seeing this sight, the surrounding masked men were shocked. In an instant they recognized the Wuxia steel sword in Wang Chong's hand. Carrick-Spazinu and Abbasid Caliphate valued the craftsmanship of swords, and they had spent a great deal of effort on it. Even though the machetes in their hands couldn't compare to Mosaid's, they were still top-notch swords. Only the sword on the Bluebottle Pavilion was capable of severing them with a single slash as though they were weightless. The masked men in black immediately panicked. They had originally not thought much of Wang Chong, but now that they knew about that sword, they immediately felt a great deal of apprehension. Kill! Wang Chong's reaction was extremely sharp. He immediately sensed the panic of his opponents, and this was the best opportunity for him to attack. At this moment, Shanghai and Menglong had already developed great trust in Wang Chong. Without a word, the two of them worked together to attack the masked men. The masked men immediately panicked. In the blink of an eye, two of them had already been injured by Shanghai and Menglong. However, just as the two of them were about to slaughter the masked men, a sudden change occurred. Pung pung, the masked men on the other side suddenly threw out a few black balls. These black balls exploded the moment they landed on the ground, and thick smoke filled the air. Not good. Be careful of the bewildering smoke. Wang Chong was alarmed. He couldn't see clearly in the black smoke, and he didn't expect the masked men from Carrick-Spazinu to carry such hidden weapons. In the instant that he spoke, the black smoke filled the entire area, making it impossible to see anything clearly. Wang Chong's expression changed. Without any time to think, he hurriedly covered his nose with his sleeves and retreated. This is a good chance. Kill him and snatch that sword. As long as we complete the mission, we can ignore the others. Amidst the black smoke, the masked men rejoiced. They actually passed through the thick smoke, as though they weren't affected by it at all. Not good. Wang Chong was astonished. His wings hadn't grown yet, and it was still possible for him to cooperate with Shanhai and Meng Long to find a few openings. However, facing 3 powerful Origin Energy Tier 8 experts at the very least, he didn't even need to think about it. Peng! Without any hesitation, Wang Chong immediately tried to flee. Can I make it in time? Little bastard, you dare to leave after killing our men? The 3 Karak-Spazinu masked men had savage expressions on their faces. Wielding sabers in their hands, they followed behind Wang Chong and charged forward. One of the Karak-Spazinu experts flicked his wrist, and without any hesitation, a saber flew toward the back of Wang Chong's neck. Gongzi, hurry up and leave. Beasts of Karak-Spazinu with me around, it won't be your turn to act so audaciously. In the blink of an eye, a domineering and deep roar sounded. Just as the masked man flicked his saber, 100 zhang away from Wang Chong, the window opened, and with a loud boom, a thick metal arrow shot out from the window like a burning flame. In an instant, it traversed through the air and struck the saber on Wang Chong's back. Dang! The saber was struck by the thick metal arrow, and with a loud clang it shattered into pieces. The 3 masked men were horrified. But before they could react, pong! Yet another thick metal arrow shot through the air, striking one of the masked men. The thick metal arrow pierced through the side of the masked man's heart. The accuracy of the arrow was frightening. The masked man's body flew into the air before collapsing to the ground like a wooden pillar. Before he could even say a word, he had already breathed his last. Not good. It's an expert archer. The faces of the remaining 2 masked men warped, as though they had met with something terrifying. Before they could say anything, the 2 of them suddenly turned around and dashed in 2 different directions. One of them dashed along the wall while the other climbed up the roof. Pung! Pung! The room 1,000 feet away was like the most terrifying black hole. Before the Karak-Spazinu masked man could take more than a few steps, he was pinned to the wall by a thick black metal head that came out of nowhere. As for the other Karak-Spazinu masked man, he was already more than 10 feet away. He was about to use the tall roof of the house to block the enemy's line of sight. However, the moment he leapt into the air towards another house, a thick iron arrow suddenly shot out from within, piercing through his neck in one shot. Fresh blood splattered in midair, and the immense force behind the arrow sent the masked man flying more than a dozen zhang away. Eventually, he fell to the ground by the wall of the Wang family residence. In the blink of an eye, the 3 Origin Energy Tier 8 Karak-Spazinu masked men were killed cleanly. Tuoba Guiyuan? Wang Chong halted his footsteps and turned around. He stared at the pitch-black room 100 zhang away in astonishment. The Karak-Spazinu masked men didn't know where that place was, but Wang Chong knew that it was the bearded swordsmith he had taken in not too long ago. Tuoba Guan. To think that he's an expert archer. Wang Chong was astonished. In the Tang dynasty, there were 3 prominent occupations on the battlefield. One was the heavy infantry, the other was the archer, and the last one was the cavalry. Wang Chong didn't expect Tuoba Guan to be an archer, and from the looks of it, he seemed to be an incredible expert archer. Gongzi, don't worry. With me around, none of them will be able to escape. Tuoba Guiyuan's loud and clear voice could be heard from the open window. His voice was deep and steady, and his arrows were like gods. Along with his voice, thick iron arrows were shot out one after another. Thick smoke billowed from the thick iron arrows as they flew out with astonishing force. These thick iron arrows were like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. Wherever Tuoba Guan's arrows landed, the masked men would fall to the ground. It didn't matter whether they released the bewildering smoke or escaped. I really found an expert this time. Tuoba Guan's archery left Wang Chong in awe. Wang Chong only knew that Tuoba Guan was skilled in swordsmithing, but he didn't expect him to be so skilled as well. With such a person around, as well as a Blonadin and Arloja, the 2 experts from Sindhu, the Wang family residence was practically impregnable. It didn't matter how many people came. This is truly an unintentional harvest. Recalling Tuoba Guiyuan's astounding archery skills and how Tuoba Guiyuan managed to survive the oppression and pursuit of the Zhang, Lu, Huang, and Chang clans in the capital in his previous life, Wang Chong suddenly understood everything. Sheathing the Wuxia steel sword, Wang Chong walked toward Shanhai and Menglong with widened strides. The two of them fell to the ground, unmoving. Chapter 82. Wang Chong dragged the two of them to a ventilated area before walking into the room. Retrieving a teapot, he poured some water on their faces and sprinkled some on their noses and mouths. A moment later, the two of them slowly regained consciousness. Young master, are you all right? We fainted. The two of them were still in a daze. Recalling what happened at the very last moment, their faces were filled with shame. They were all elite soldiers in the army, but in the end, they were defeated by these inferior sleeping gas bombs. If not for the thick smoke and the fact that the two of them were lying on the ground, as well as the fact that their attention was on Wang Chong, their heads would have been separated from their bodies by now. There's no need to blame yourselves. Those people came prepared. Putting aside you, even I didn't expect them to bring such a thing. Wang Chong consoled them. You two should rest here for a while. The sleeping gas shouldn't be poisonous, so you should be fine after resting for a while. The effects of the sleeping gas bombs were far more formidable than they had imagined. Basically, Shanhai and Menglong wouldn't be able to fight for the time being. Wang Chong lifted his head to look into the distance. The battle was nearing its end. With Arloja, Ablonidin, and Tuobagyon Pincer attacking them, the masked men of Karak-Spazinu were defeated much faster than expected. Gongzi, are you all right? The moment the battle ended, Arloja and Ablonidin rushed over anxiously. While the two of them were fighting, the one they were most concerned about was Wang Chong. Wang Chong was the savior of Sindhu. If anything were to happen to him, the two of them wouldn't know how they were going to answer to the high priest. I'm fine. Did you manage to find anything? Wang Chong waved his hands casually. There's nothing else. They have all committed suicide. The two of them replied. The masked men who charged into the Wang family residence died horribly. Some of them knew that they couldn't escape, but they didn't want to be captured alive. Thus, they stabbed the curved blades in their hands into their hearts. Hurry up and clean up the courtyard. Don't let mother see it. Wang Chong wasn't surprised. Upon seeing a few guards walking over, he instructed them and left. Is this the sleeping gas bomb? On the chest of one of the Karak-Spazinu masked men, Wang Chong fished out a purplish-brown bewildering smoke grenade the size of a metal ball. Recalling how experts like Shanhai and Menglong collapsed to the ground the moment they inhaled the bewildering smoke, they were still feeling giddy even now. These guys are not afraid of the sleeping gas at all. They must have swallowed the antidote beforehand. Wang Chong searched again and sure enough, he found a small bag on the man's waist. There were a few dark purple pills inside, which should be the antidote for the sleeping gas bomb. Wang Chong put these things together with the sleeping gas bombs he had just found into the bag and hung it on his waist. He walked around a few more times before returning to his study. As soon as he entered the room, Wang Chong's eyes narrowed. He immediately felt that something was wrong. There was something wrong with the atmosphere in the room. The window that he had opened when he left was now closed. On the table, the draft paper of the 7-foot-long saber that he had drawn was also gone. Someone has entered. Wang Chong's heart tightened, and he immediately realized that something was amiss. There were so many experts in the courtyard, and there were even Ablonidin, Arloja, and Tuobagyon around. Yet, someone was able to sneak into his study without anyone noticing. This person's strength must be fearsome. Don't move. Wang Chong reacted swiftly. His body tensed up, and just as he was about to leap out, a chill seeped through his body and aimed at his back. Don't shout, don't scream. Don't expect to attract the monks from the western regions over. They are definitely not as fast as my sword. A cold, emotionless voice came from behind him. The voice was very low. Wang Chong's heart turned cold, and his body immediately froze. The person was a lady. Even though she tried her best to conceal it, Wang Chong could still sense it. Furthermore, the other party's strength was inconceivably high. Even though she was clearly behind him, Wang Chong couldn't sense her location at all. All he could feel was an indistinct aura fusing into the darkness. This aura could only be emitted by a single person. An assassin, and a formidable one at that. If you want the Wuxia steel sword, you can take it now. Before Wang Chong could finish his words, he heard the sound of footsteps. Gongzi, are you asleep? A voice sounded from outside. It was Tuobaguan's voice, and beside him were Ablonidin and Arloja. The courtyard has been cleaned up, and all the corpses have been disposed of. None of them escaped. If Gongzi doesn't have any other instructions, we will be heading down to rest. Also, we found a dozen scimitars. Gongzi, how do you intend to deal with them? Wang Chong fell into a daze. Separated by a wooden door, he suddenly felt an indescribable feeling. In that instant, he suddenly came to a realization. This person's strength was much higher than he had imagined. She had actually sensed Arloja, Ablonidin, and Tuobaguan walking over together without him noticing. His sudden intrusion caught her off guard, and with Ablonidin, Arloja, and Tuobaguan walking over together, she had no choice but to restrain him in advance. The darkness was silent. That person didn't say a word, but the chilling aura emanating from the sword behind his back intensified. The meaning behind it was clear if he were to say a single word more, even if it meant being discovered by Ablonidin, Arloja, and Tuobaguan, she would kill him immediately. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil, and his heart was thumping wildly. This was the first time he had encountered such a dangerous situation ever since his reincarnation. This person was more than twice as strong as the black-clothed masked man from Karak Spazinu. Her cultivation had definitely surpassed Origin Energy Tier 9, reaching the true martial realm. Before such an expert, Wang Chong didn't stand much of a chance. Ablonidin, Arloja, and Tuobaguan were only a single door away from him. If he wanted to seek help, this was his only chance. Wang Chong wanted to seek help, but he wasn't confident that he could dodge the attack from his back. Gongzi. It was pitch black outside the door, and it was impossible to see anything through the door. Tuobaguan, Arloja, and the others waited for Wang Chong's reply for a long time, and they couldn't help but ask. It felt like an instant, but at the same time it felt like an eternity. When an even more intense chilling aura emanated from his back, Wang Chong finally regained his senses. This wasn't the time for him to call for help. Most probably before Ablonidin, Arloja, and the others could barge in, he would already be dead. Since the other party was able to sneak in without anyone noticing, he definitely had the strength to do so. It has been hard on you all tonight. Go and have a good rest. As for those machetes, they are top-notch weapons. Just leave them to Shanhai and Menglong, leave them on the weapon rack in the corner of the warehouse. Wang Chong spoke, and a hint of fatigue could be heard in his voice. As expected, the chilling aura behind him subsided, as though it was extremely satisfied with his performance. Yes, Gongzi. The three of them did not seem to have any suspicions. They responded and then turned around. The sound of their footsteps became more and more distant, gradually disappearing into the darkness. As the footsteps of the three faded into the distance, Wang Chong could faintly hear a sneer in the darkness, and his heart sank to the bottom of the lake. I know that you are sent by Mozade. Since you have won, you can take the Wuxia steel sword by my waist. I only hope that you can let me go after obtaining the sword. Wang Chong said. He seemed to have completely given up on resisting. As he spoke, he reached for the Wuxia steel sword by his waist. Humph, at least you are sensible. A disdainful sneer sounded behind him, but he didn't seem to reject Wang Chong's Wuxia steel sword. You are cheating. Before Wang Chong could retrieve the Wuxia steel sword, the assassin behind him seemed to have noticed something. His eyebrows twitched, and a cold gleam emanated from the tip of his sword. However, the other party realized it too late. The reason why Wang Chong sent Arloja, Ablonidin, and Tuobaguan away and claimed that he would retrieve the Wuxia steel sword was to lower the other party's guard. On the other hand, Wang Chong's meager cultivation of Origin Energy Tier 5 deepened the other party's disdain. Under such circumstances, it wasn't easy for Wang Chong to create an opportunity for himself. How could he possibly let go of this life-and-death opportunity? Pung! A metal ball-sized sleeping gas grenade was silently flicked onto the ground by Wang Chong's finger. In an instant, a thick sleeping gas spread throughout the room at an astonishing speed. The sleeping gas grenade seemed to have been modified, and it spread at an astonishing speed. The instant it landed on the ground, The thick sleeping gas had already shrouded Wang Chong and the mysterious assassin behind him. "You are courting death," a lady bellowed from behind. Killing intent surged, and the cry of a sword echoed in the air. In an instant, a sharp glint of a sword flew toward Wang Chong's back. If this sword were to land, Wang Chong would surely die. Wang Chong swiftly took out a few purple pills from the pouch by his waist and stuffed them into his mouth. At this crucial moment, he executed the submerged dragon wave of the dragon bone art. As though a nimble serpent, he descended from the sky and dove into the waves. The darkness in the study and the sleeping gas grenade that Wang Chong had tossed out played a crucial role. A cold glint flashed past Wang Chong's back, slicing Wang Chong's clothes into two. At the same time, Wang Chong rolled under the table and pulled open the distance between him and his opponent. "Do you think you can escape?" A trembling hum echoed in the air. The table filled with teapots, cups, brushes, inkstones, and papers was smashed by a single palm. Wood shavings flew everywhere. The assassin hidden in the darkness followed closely behind Wang Chong like a phantom. "Trying to play tricks in front of me? Are you tired of living?" The assassin flipped his right hand, and the sharp sword in his hand shone with a dazzling cold glint in the darkness. Following the assassin's hand gesture, the sword slashed toward Wang Chong. Before the sword could even strike down, the surging shockwaves had already surged over with an earth-shattering momentum. "Eat my hidden weapon." Chapter 83. This is bad. After seeing Wang Chong's sleeping gas grenades and seeing him tossing out some hidden weapons, even the courageous assassin in the darkness subconsciously retreated. At the same time, she struck out with her palm, and an explosive shockwave burst forth, deflecting the hidden weapons in the air. "I've been fooled by him again." Realizing that nothing had happened to the hidden weapons in the air after being struck, the female assassin flew into a rage. Previously, when Wang Chong presented her with the Wuxia steel sword, he had already fooled her once. This time, she was fooled by Wang Chong with the antidote to the sleeping gas grenades. How could the black-clothed female assassin possibly accept this? In her eyes, Wang Chong's martial arts were beneath average, but he was extremely slippery. "If I were to let you escape, I would really be able to commit suicide." Seeing how slippery Wang Chong was as though a leopard, about to leap out of the window, the female assassin flicked her right hand, and 3 short swords, each around a chi long and as thin as a finger, flew out of the window in front of Wang Chong, sealing off Wang Chong's escape route. If Wang Chong were to forcefully charge out of the window, he would surely die. At the same time, the female assassin's body jolted, and her speed abruptly increased by several folds. As though a specter, she streaked across the air and caught up to Wang Chong in an instant. A cold gleam flashed across the darkness, and with a clean slash it flew toward Wang Chong's neck. Spectre steps. Wang Chong was astonished. He suddenly understood how this person managed to get past the heavy guards of the Wang residence and sneak in together with Ablonidin and Arloja. Since he couldn't leap out of the window, Wang Chong immediately used Dragon Coil to stop his momentum. At the same time, he executed the stellar steps and slashed with the Wuxia steel sword. Clang! The crisp sound of metal echoed in the darkness. In an instant, the sword in the hands of the female assassin was severed by Wang Chong's sword. The sharp edge of the sword tore off a piece of her sleeves and left a sharp wound on her fair arm. However, before Wang Chong could chop off the other party's arm, bang! An arm struck Wang Chong's chest, and a huge force gushed out like a flood. In an instant, Wang Chong was sent flying like a kite with a broken string, as if he had suffered a heavy injury. He smashed heavily into the wall with a bang, spitting out a mouthful of blood, and his face was as pale as paper. What a sharp sword! In the darkness, the female assassin raised her hand. There was a faint wound on her arm, and it was incomparably sharp. Glancing at the Wuxia steel sword in Wang Chong's hands, a hint of fear flashed across the female assassin's eyes. "I heard that the #1 swordsmith in the world appeared in the Tang dynasty, but I didn't believe it. Seems like it's you. Let me ask you something. Are you able to forge this sword?" The female assassin flicked her wrist, and a piece of Xian paper appeared in her hands. On it was the 7-chi-long narrow saber drawn by Wang Chong. After an intense battle, the female assassin didn't continue pursuing Wang Chong. Instead, she asked about an unimportant drawing. If it was anyone else, they would surely find it bizarre. However, Wang Chong wasn't surprised at all. As Wang Chong glanced at the 3 conical daggers stuck on the windowsill, a thought flashed through his mind. This is fate. Wang Chong sighed. There was no such bizarre weapon in the Central Plains. In fact, in the entire continent, including Charaxbazinu and Abbasid Caliphate, no one knew how to use such a weapon. In Wang Chong's memories, there was only one place that knew how to use such a weapon. In another time-space continuum, that place was known as Japan. In this world, it was known as the 10 Islands of Japan. They were 10 islands in the eastern seas, a place ruled by female supremacy, a place where martial arts were mainly focused on hacking and slashing. Wang Chong didn't expect that the 7-chi-long narrow saber he created using the Japanese katana, as the foundation would attract the Eastern Islands' female assassin from the same place in this world. All of this seemed to be fated. This was probably the reason why she didn't make a move immediately when he first entered the room. Yes. Even though such thoughts flashed across his mind, Wang Chong replied without the slightest hesitation. Hearing Wang Chong's words, the female assassin stared at Wang Chong, and a complicated expression suddenly appeared in her eyes. But soon, the female assassin regained her cold demeanor. What is hard is easy to break. The longer the sword, the easier it is to break in battle. This saber of yours is 7 chi long, almost as tall as a human. Compared to ordinary swords, it is much easier for it to break. How do you plan to overcome this problem? The female assassin's voice was calm, but there was a chilling killing intent in the air. It felt as though as long as Wang Chong were to give a wrong answer, she would immediately kill him. However, Wang Chong wasn't nervous at all. Ha ha ha, regardless of whether you believe me or not, if I say it's possible, it's naturally possible. Wang Chong chuckled. Immense confidence flowed from his eyes. The longer a sword, the easier it was to break. This was the greatest problem in forging swords and sabers. Before Wang Chong, it wasn't that no one had thought of forging longer swords and sabers. Other than the problem of weight and inconvenience in usage, a bigger problem was that these swords and sabers were much easier to break than ordinary swords and sabers. Just like what this female assassin said, the harder it was, the easier it was to break. If one couldn't solve this problem, forging longer swords and sabers would be meaningless. However, this problem didn't exist for Wang Chong. Wang Chong knew of a unique forging technique that could avoid this problem. This forging technique was known as tempering. It could greatly increase the toughness of a weapon, and by complementing it with some other techniques during the forging process, this problem could be solved. However, Wang Chong wouldn't tell this to the female assassin. In this world, other than Wang Chong, there was no one who knew of this forging technique, needless to say forging it. This was the unique forging technique that Wang Chong possessed. If not for this confidence, Wang Chong wouldn't have designed such a thick, narrow and slender saber. The black-clothed female assassin stared intently at Wang Chong, as though trying to peer into his heart to see if he was lying or not. Wang Chong also did not avoid her gaze, openly meeting it without the slightest hesitation. The #1 swordsmith in the world, I'll have to trouble you to make a trip with me. As long as you forge a sword like this for me, I might be able to grant you a swift death after this. Don't try to resist and don't try to shout. You won't get the chance. This time I'm only throwing you off the wall. The next time it won't be so simple. As the female assassin spoke, she suddenly raised her right hand and raised the broken sword that was gleaming coldly. At the same time, her left hand reached out to grab the other 3 short swords. She seemed to have made up her mind to kidnap Wang Chong to forge a sword for her alone. Even though her sword had been broken by Wang Chong, the female assassin wasn't worried at all. Wang Chong had already been injured by her palm strike. He wasn't a match for her even when he was at his peak, needless to say at his current state. Even a broken sword was more than enough for her to deal with him. Clack! With light footsteps, the female assassin walked toward Wang Chong. Her footsteps were calm and firm, as though Wang Chong was already a fish in her palm. Do you know that you're already at death's door? To think that you would still be in the mood for me to forge a sword for you. Seated on the floor, Wang Chong suddenly chuckled. There's no need to waste your effort and breath. Do you think that I'll believe you? The female assassin sneered. Her footsteps didn't stop in the slightest as she walked toward Wang Chong. Hey, I knew that you would do this. If I'm not wrong, you should be practicing the specter steps, right? Wang Chong suddenly said with a smile. Wang. A moment ago, the female assassin was still mocking Wang Chong, but upon hearing the word specter steps, her body trembled and she abruptly came to a halt. The specter steps allows one to traverse through the darkness as though a specter. You must have relied on this to sneak in, right? I don't know where you learned the specter steps from, but do you know that the specter steps is actually in conflict with most cultivation techniques? The more you cultivate this cultivation technique, the closer you are to death. You're already at death's door. And yet you still have the mood to work for others. You even have the mood to kidnap me to forge a sword for you. What a joke. Wang Chong didn't conceal the disdain in his eyes. He looked at the Eastern Islands' female assassin as though he was looking at a dead person. The powerful and wealthy Tang dynasty was like a magnet, attracting all the powers and tribes in the world. Beneath the peaceful surface of the Tang dynasty, there were countless powers lurking in the shadows. This Eastern Islands female assassin was clearly one of them. In order to conceal her identity and not arouse suspicion, she had no idea which faction she had joined to learn this assassination technique. Even though the specter steps was powerful, its flaws were equally huge. Regardless of which power she was recruited by, the other party didn't intend to let her live for too long. You're spouting nonsense. The Eastern Islands female assassin's face turned cold. The killing intent in the air suddenly intensified by more than tenfold, and the temperature in the room fell abruptly. At this moment, the aura exuded by the Eastern Islands female assassin was completely different from before. Not only was it much stronger, it was as sharp as the edge of a blade. Wang Chong's conjecture wasn't wrong. This female assassin had concealed her true cultivation. Her true strength should be that of the saber. Am I spouting nonsense? Try to circulate your qi according to the specter steps. Circulate your qi through your zifu and shanzhong acupoints to see if you feel any pain. Leaning against the wall, Wang Chong sneered coldly. Wang. Even though the female assassin said that she didn't believe him, her body subconsciously began to circulate according to Wang Chong's instructions. Wang, a dense black aura gushed out from her body. In an instant, the female assassin's silhouette blurred as though a phantom, as though fusing with the darkness. But the next moment, with a dull grunt, the black aura dissipated, and the female assassin appeared in the room once more. Her face was incomparably pale, and cold sweat was dripping down her forehead. Her cold, emotionless, and composed eyes swiftly glanced at Wang Chong. For the first time, panic appeared on her face. Wang Chong was right. When her zhenqi flowed through her zifu and shanzhong acupoints, she really felt a sharp pain in her juk and fengzi acupoints. The zhenqi in her body nearly dissipated. This is a good chance. Just as the female assassin was panicking, Wang Chong slapped the ground with his palm and leaped into the air. Executing dragon ascending the clouds, his body was as agile as a serpent as he leaped out of the window without any hesitation. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.